appears that we are now live on YouTube. So welcome anybody who's watching to the last regular meeting of council for this term of council. Certainly the last meeting of council for two members of council, myself and Councillor Comfort. So we'll really enjoy it. I'll call the meeting to order and look to the agenda to see if there are any changes or additions.
There are no changes from administration.
Okay. Councillor Comfort.
With your indulgence, I would like to address some remarks at the end of the meeting, if that's possible.
Sure, you bet. So we'll just put that under, well, make it, we'll just do it before before we adjourn. I'll open the floor.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And you know, you're the boss until the 18th. So
yeah, right. That's what people think, huh? Okay, so with no changes to the agenda, I would look for move that the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And this morning we have one delegation from the Circular Innovation Council, Ms. Goddard, or St. Goddard. Welcome to the town of Canmore.
I really wish I was really there, but thank you very much for the welcome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in the Rocky Mountains, so you're missing it.
Is it ever not a beautiful day in the Rocky Mountains?
Occasionally, yeah.
I say as a proud Canadian.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I know that you guys have a pretty busy agenda this morning. I do have a formal PowerPoint, although I'd like the discussion to be as informal as possible to ensure that all of the information that we want to relay with you is understood. I'm going to probably not very cleverly try to share my screen. You guys let me know if you see it.
We see the full you see the full screen. If you could make that we're seeing all of the different slides as well as the main screen. There you go.
There's that one.
Perfect.
There we go. We did it. Okay, that's great. So what I thought I'd do is start with a little bit about who we are as an organization and why we're in front of you this morning as a delegation. And my apologies, I've got two screens. So if you see the side of my face off, frequently, you know that I'm actually reading slides from another screen as well, so I can see yours. So you may have heard of us. And in fact, we're a sister organization to the Recycling Council of Alberta, who we know well and we do lots of work with. But previously, and for the past 40 some years, we were the Recycling Council of Ontario. And as a non-for-profit environment organization, very focused on outcomes that drive waste reduction. And typically when we talk about waste in this context, it's solid waste, which is near and dear to every municipality's issue of concern across the country. And I'm sure that's no different for the beautiful Canmore. So, and in that regard, and historically, most folks know us as the organization that brought interests together between governments and municipalities and the private sector to create the world-renowned Blue Box program. So that's really when folks hear about the Recycling Council of Ontario, that's what they think of. And we are unique in the sense that we're non-for-profit, and in fact, we have national charity status. But we're unique in the sense that our membership is not, we don't represent any one given sector or industry as it relates to recycling and waste reduction. We, in fact, our membership spans the entire value and supply chain. So it's made up of industries and brand holders that produce products and packaging, put them onto the Canadian marketplace, but we also represent collectors and processors, those that deal with end of life of those packaging products and try to create feedstocks for remanufacturing. We also have a representation of educators and academia, researchers, small to medium-sized businesses and startups. And so with that kind of diverse membership, we really feel that we've got a strong idea of the market, and we certainly have a long history in developing good policies and effective policies that would move the market towards waste reduction. So that kind of gives you an idea of our history. So we've been around for quite some time, and the logos at the bottom of that slide really are programs that you may have heard of, but these are all programs that our organization has created and has brought to the marketplace with an aim of educating and providing services, tools, and resources in order to help our memberships and beyond deal with waste and support more waste reduction activities. This last year, in June of 2020, we actually transitioned to our new brand, our new look, which is called the Circular Innovation Council from the Recycling Council of Ontario. And we registered the organization as a national one. And this idea to move towards having circularity or supporting the circular economy more broadly was to take our roots in waste prevention and waste reduction and to use all that know-how, all that intelligence and institutional knowledge to support more broadly the transition of Canada towards a circular economy and to achieve and realize all the benefits that come with that transition towards circularity from a linear. And I can talk a little bit about what that actually means. So our goal as an organization moving forward is to put circular economy concepts into action. So that important transition really led us to some of the circular procurement work, which we're doing, which I'm going to really dig into in subsequent slides. So to sort of describe in the three pillars of our actions as an organization, we do a lot of economic and environmental policy and procurement work as it relates to developing best practices, bringing knowledge and know-how from around the globe into a Canadian context. We do a lot of kicking in the tires and dig into those best practices through our research and pilot projects that we work with in both the public and the private sector. And then a really third and most important pillar of our work is to take that experiences and to provide in an open source way to educate and to provide action-oriented programs to facilitate knowledge sharing and also for audiences and parties of interest to take action. So to dig into the circular economy, it's certainly a buzz term. Canada as a country held for the second time virtually the World Circular Economy Forum just last month, where we welcomed 9,000 registrants from across the globe for in all sectors and all machinations for those that are interested in this idea of having an economy that's based on circularity and again connecting that to the social and environmental and economic goals more broadly. So to describe very briefly the difference between linear versus circular, we create this graphic to try to depict what it really means. And whereas previously we were really focused on waste reduction and recycling, we now take that base and we work very broadly on production and consumption that really drives and connects with what we really value in people and planet. So this term sustainability has been around for some time, and sustainability is really really nibbled on the edge, if you will, I guess, in terms of being able to maintain this linear economy of take, make, and waste. So take resources from the earth, makes products and packaging that we use on a regular basis that ultimately end up in waste. And then we're doing everything we possibly can to be able to redirect that waste into reproduction cycles. Now, in a circular economy, you're actually creating an economy that thinks about replenishment from the beginning, that restorative and regeneration by the design of the packaging and products. It is how the way that we use it and consume it. And then, of course, at the end of its life, how we are keeping those inherent materials at their highest utility and value at all times. So it's this broader economy based on very purposeful, very specific and strategic production and consumption that actually delivers on the social and environmental benefits, as well as the economic prosperity that, of course, we all recognize is what we want moving forward. So this redefinition of value is really important to underpinning the transition between a linear and a circular economy. So my apologies for sort of whipping through this really meaty kind of concept and discussion, but it really underpins now what we're bringing forward to you as a council. And so we felt it really important to try to give you a little taste of what it means between the differences between linear and circular. And one of the most important and exciting, I think, opportunities in this transition is that as we start to kind of redefine what we mean as value, and usually value means price or cost, or monetary value. We don't think about how we produce and consume in the way that it delivers the benefits of other ways we define value as human beings, and certainly human beings that run municipalities. So the environmental and social aspects of how we buy and what we consume and how we use it and how we discard it is actually front and center as you're thinking about buying and consuming for a circular economy. And the most amazing thing about redefining this is that you can actually deliver on all of these social and environmental and economic goals simultaneously. Often we think about when picking one over the other or prioritizing or maybe conceding one for the other. We often think that that purchasing environmental products means that we have to spend more money or that we have to give up on social goals. But in fact, we learn, and as we apply the true definition of a circular economy, that we can actually attain many of these benefits simultaneously. So list some of them there. They will be very obvious to you. Some of them will be things that, of course, you as a council have held near and dear and have actually called out and made public through your policies as well. So we talk about resource efficiency. We talk about diverting waste into reproductive cycles. We certainly talk about conserving waste or water, and energy, and of course, reducing carbon footprints, limiting single use, and mitigating climate change. And on a social side, we always want to think local, think about training and—
Excuse me, Ms. Goddard. I
Yes.
just wanted to give you a time check. You're at 10 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. So thanks for the prompt. I can go on forever. So when we start thinking about what does it mean to employ the circular economy, these are the 5 business models that really underpin what that means. Circular supplies talks about developing, producing goods with less energy, less resources, less water. Product as a service is not owning it, but to use the product as an asset. We talk about extending the life of a product, sharing the product amongst users so that, again, it increases and retains its value. And then, of course, demanding less virgin resources through resource recovery as well. So circular procurement is really what I want to talk about here. And this circular procurement as a subject matter is being recognized globally as being able to deliver on these 9 sustainability United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, of which Canada has signed on to. So it is a very powerful and underutilized tool. And why are we picking sort of on public procurement or public buyers? Because they have a duty of care using taxpayers' dollars to influence markets and to spend responsibly. And in fact, in Canada, public procurement represents about $200 billion worth of value. So a lot of influence, if you will, a lot of buying power. And in fact, in the municipal sector, 80% of it rests with municipalities. So we are talking to municipality by municipality by municipality to talk with them about their opportunity to link their broader objectives and deliver them through their own procurement power. Often municipalities, be they small, large, rural, urban, don't think that they actually have a market influence through their buying power. We disagree. And in fact, as we start to collaborate and coalesce this buying power amongst municipalities, we think that in fact we can transition markets towards circularity exponentially. And of course, we want governments as they acknowledge themselves as leaders. So we pulled out some of the objectives that the city of Canmore has actually made and try to identify this and link it with, in fact, your procurement activities and policies as well. So these will be recognizable to you. And one of the areas, one of the sort of first requests we're trying to make of the municipalities that we are courting towards using circular procurement in a more strategic way is to invite them to sign on to 100 mayoral commitments. We are identifying 100 early adopters, leaders, if you will, across the country that are prepared to sign on to a mayoral commitment, which is going to represent a first national declaration of cities and regions from across Canada that recognize and embrace the transition to a circular economy and the benefits it derives. And by doing so, doing by doing, and in first prioritizing their procurement to do so. And so this is the declaration and the wording that we're using, and we've already submitted the request to your mayor. We aim to release this mayoral first signatures during our Circular Procurement Summit, which we invited your staff, and of course you as council members are more than welcome to participate. It's upcoming, a mere 13 days away, where we'll be bringing governments and those that recognize the power of circular procurement to drive markets towards circularity. 1 week in October, and then by extension another week in November. The agenda is there for your interest. Big plenary discussions and right into specific product categories that are very common where municipalities spend their money, like construction, infrastructure, fleet management, textiles, and food. So we encourage you to take a look at the agenda, and we invite you to participate. And this is where we're actually going to be unveiling the mayoral signatures. There's a website that where we're putting all of our resources and tools and information, and a lot of the sample RFPs, RFIs, tendering documents, agreements that your procurement, your sustainability, and your department heads at the staff level can utilize in order to start to transition your procurement requirements towards circularity. So a lot of good resources there. And then of course, we are offering workshops where we will come in and customize knowledge base based on Canmore's specific reality, and to start to kickstart this idea of leveraging procurement to deliver a circular economy for Canmore and beyond. So my apologies for going as quickly as I did. There's a lot to squeeze in there. I'm more than happy to take questions, and again, also looking for council to agree to be one of our early adopters and to sign on to the mayoral declaration. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for that comprehensive and brisk overview of what the Circular Innovation Council is doing. I appreciate that it's a complex matter to try to relay in a short time. I'm looking to other members of council to see if there's questions. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Ms. Goddard. Councillor Comfort and I have been on the Bow Valley Waste Management Commission and attended a number of Alberta Recycling Council seminars and conferences back when we could do that. And we've heard a lot about circular economy, so we're quite familiar with this concept. One of the other things we've heard about is extended producer responsibility. Where does that fit into your model?
Yeah, it's a really great call. Thank you for the question. So, there isn't one market intervention that, is going to address all of our environmental needs. But there are some key ones, and producer responsibility is one. Regulation, usually it comes at a provincial level, and the whole concept of transitioning the cost away from the taxpayer to the producers that are bringing goods and packaging into the market is a sound one. And, the intention there is to, by extending those costs, hoping that we'll get better design products, companies that are more involved in dealing with our environmental issues, particularly waste. However, regulation is a blunt instrument. It's cumbersome. It takes time. It always is fraught with lobbying. It sometimes gets watered down, and it takes a long, long time. So while it's important, we think that buying and procurement gets markets to stand up in exactly the same way, maybe with more attention, because their job is to sell you things, and they certainly are motivated to sell you things. And we think that you're buying as a municipality is an instrument that you can use immediately. And that you can take control on your own. And if you collaborate with your other municipalities, you can shift markets maybe in a more meaningful way, more expeditiously than extended producer responsibility has been able to do in the past. I know EPR is coming to Alberta. It's critical, but it's been a long time in the making, decades, if you will, in terms of lobbying government to make it a priority. But procurement is something that the city of Canmore can do right now. You have control of your own buying. And so we support EPR, we think that circular procurement activities should be undertaken in parallel and immediate.
And Alberta is one of the few provinces that doesn't have EPR, is that correct?
That is correct. I know it's coming, and we work really closely with the RCA to sort of nudge the provincial government along. But like I say, it's a work in progress. It's an important tool, and in fact, hopefully, when you set a course with your buying power, it's going to be easier and easier for these producers to actually comply with EPR regulations, because you'll have already encouraged them to do that through your procurement powers.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, this is very interesting. My only hesitation here is we're still members of the Natural Step program. We have a beautiful plaque in our front entry, and we hear about it at election time shortly after, and then it goes away for 4 years. And so it feels like this is something else that's like not necessarily going to be effective. And can you explain to me how this is going to be effective?
Yeah, I'm not certain, what the Natural Step program sort of offers or promises or how it works in comparison. But what I can say is, going back to our tagline as an organization, this is about taking concepts into action and providing you the tools and resources and the know-how to use your own influences in the way that you are not dependent on other things. So, I think municipalities and all governments, quite frankly, have a duty of care as they are utilizing taxpayers' dollars to demand the kind of products and services from the companies that you employ, just inherent to who you are as a municipality. So you have a fiduciary and a duty of care with those taxpayers' dollars to align, I guess, and connect your environmental goals with the way that you buy goods and services. And of course, the way that you do that, it demonstrates leadership for the rest of your community, and in fact, other municipalities across Alberta. And you don't actually have to wait for anyone else to do that. You can take full control of that. And that's the point of this, that you use your buying power in the way that you think connects to your sustainability and social goals, irrespective of what else is happening out there. What we aim to do is coalesce and align, I guess, the standards around circular procurement so that other municipalities could do the same. It's really difficult for you as in some cases, the city of Canmore to buy computers. Let's use that as an example. You're not going to have enough buying power to change the way that Apple or HP or Dell makes a computer. But if we get enough municipalities and we align that with other government buying, you can start to dictate the kinds of products and packaging that you want that are more environmentally sensitive. And we think that that's really important. So this is about taking action, using your influence with your procurement and the taxpayers' dollars that you are responsible for.
Great. And I have another question, which is, and thank you for that answer. That was very comprehensive.
Sure.
My other question is, how will you work with provincial organizations that are governing bodies for the municipalities, such as AUMA?
Yeah.
Do you have a plan for that?
Yeah, thanks. So we are constantly outreaching and identifying provincial and other organizations like FCM, like AUMA, that have a relationship with the municipalities, who obviously are our primary target for circular procurement supports and actions. So we are engaging with them. We want to make them official partners. And in fact, we hope that through their organizations, we can reach all Alberta municipalities. And in fact, we can start standardizing procurement criteria and processes so that we're coalescing this buying power. You're not going to coalesce your money. It's not possible, but you can certainly coalesce your standards and your buying power by agreeing on a set of criteria that you all use as Alberta municipalities. And we aim to do that. We're not big enough to not work with these provincial organizations. We wish we were, but we're not. So those are really critical as provincial organizations. And in fact, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities we've identified is another very key important partner, and we are already engaging with them.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from members of council? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you. While I have you here, could I just ask, do you have any early successes that you can point to for our benefit?
Yeah, we do. We've got 2 projects on the go with the City of Toronto and the City of Richmond. And then we've got several others that have already signed up for the workshops to start to learn about circular economy, circular procurement, and what they can do. So the example in the City of Toronto is a circular procurement framework, which they've adopted now citywide. It's signed off by the city manager. And in fact, it is vertically integrated with all of their departments. So it's not just public works or the sustainability leads that are responsible for this. It's in fact every department head that has a responsibility to use its taxpayers' dollars and spend its budgets in a way that drives a circular economy. So that framework is the first of its kind in Canada, and we were heavily influential and happy to do that. It is Toronto, so it's nice to, but not every municipality is as big. So we're also working with small to medium-sized municipalities as well to take the concepts of that framework and to right-size it. And that's another thing that we think is so powerful about procurement is that it's completely scalable to your own reality. It doesn't have to be a big city thing. In fact, it shouldn't be a big city thing. So we do have some early adopters and some good examples. We're also part of the international community. I just got off the phone actually with 7 state European states who are looking to pool criteria to responsibly purchase computers, and they've included countries like the Netherlands and Belgium and France. And so we're part of an international community that in fact, again, is coalescing to draft these standards, and we're bringing that to a Canadian and to a local context as well. So the idea is to not reinvent the wheel, but to create resources that all municipalities can leverage and utilize.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you for your presentation, Ms. Goddard. I was just curious, how does this program work with regards to municipalities who have obligations under the New West Partnership Agreement?
Yeah, thank you for that. As part of our summit, just by way of interest, one of our opening sessions, our plenary sessions, is on national and interregional and international agreements and procurement. So one thing that we have learned and are continuing to learn, that in fact, irrespective of these agreements do not preclude or create barriers in any way, shape, or form that would advance any one given municipality's objectives around sustainability and environmental responsibility. So whether you're talking about CETA or NAFTA, it's called something new now, or even these interregional agreements, there is no encumbrances to requiring or making purchases or to tender for supplies and vendors if you are prioritizing your environmental objectives. So, and we're always learning more, but you'll see in that session, we've actually got some international expertise there, and we've got a couple of procurement lawyers that are going to dig into those very things. But what in our research has told us, these are perceived barriers. There are no real barriers to leveraging procurement, and in some cases, municipalities and other governments can actually sole source if the product or service delivers on their broader environmental or social goals.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'll just open the mic to a member of admin that may have a question at this time. And seeing none. So as you'll know, Ms. Goddard, the timing of this is a little awkward because October 18th is an election. And as of that day, the community will have voted for a new mayor. It appears that there's a very small window of opportunity for the town of Canmore to show support for this initiative. Is there an opportunity post October 18th for the town of Canmore to become actively engaged or involved with the Circular Innovation Council?
Yeah, thank you for the question and congratulations on your tender. And I realize that the timing is not ideal, but what I can say is that of course, we want, we recognize that it does take community leadership sometimes to set a course or to set a tone for a municipality. And so that's why we chose this mayoral declaration. We see this declaration and this commitment is a starting point to the relationship with the Circular Innovation Council and our work on circular procurement, not the end point. So irrespective of who gets to sit in the mayoral chair, when you are officially retired in that post, we're more than happy to work with that mayor and the rest of council and your staff. And in fact, it would be an injustice not to do that. So we see it as a starting point, and there's no question. And we want to be working with the municipality in the longer term to develop the resources and supports that they need to actually put this into motion.
Okay, thanks for that. And just out of curiosity, are there other Alberta municipalities that have agreed to sign on in this way?
We've got 4 in the works. Nobody has signed as yet. We're hoping to use you as bragging rights, to be honest, and we will absolutely be doing that. And I'm told that, so goes Canmore, so does Banff, so does several other neighbors. So that's the way it works. But we do have other municipalities that have signed on in other jurisdictions around Canada, we're pleased to say. And you need a starting point and then the dominoes go. So we'd love to be able to say that you're the first Alberta municipality. We'd be fronting every sentence to say, and we already have a leader in the area in your province. So we're more than happy to use you in that regard.
Thanks very much. I'll have to remember that comment to share with our friends in Banff. As goes Canmore, so does Banff. Good one. Are there other questions from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much for being here to present today. Now, our policy, procedural policy, our bylaw, generally speaking, we don't make a decision or have a discussion on a request that's brought from a delegation such as this, but there is an opportunity to do that. And given the tight timeline on responding to this immediate request, there is that opportunity. And And I will put motion forward for council to consider. Generally speaking, a request like this is directed to administration to bring back for review at the next business meeting, but there simply isn't time to do that. So as there's no further questions, again, thank you very much for being here to present today. I appreciate that.
Really appreciate your time and attention, and enjoy the sunny day. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Ms. DeSoto.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I'm anticipating that, well, you mentioned you would like to put a motion. I just want to remind you that you need to add an item to the agenda first.
Yeah.
And you need that to pass. Okay, thank you.
Yep, I had that in mind. So thank you. With that, I'll move the council add consideration of the request from the Circular Innovation Council to the agenda for consideration. Is there a discussion on that motion? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I would be more than happy to support this direction for the town of Canmore because circular economy is.
Sorry, at this point, we're just voting on whether to add the discussion to the agenda. But from that, I'll take it that you're supportive of adding discussion to the agenda. Is there other discussion on the motion that's on the table? Which is simply to add this to the agenda at this time. If there's no discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? And opposed? This motion's carried with Councillor Comfort in opposition. And then with that, I'll move that council direct the mayor to sign the 100 mayor commitment on behalf of the town of Canmore. And I'll speak to that motion. And it is a bit awkward for myself given I won't be the mayor in a couple of weeks. I don't want to have this misinterpreted as some sort of a swan song on my part. I think it's really valuable for the town to continue to show the importance or to speak to the importance of sustainability and other related issues to the town of Canmore. Clearly, we have been very determined and clear in our intent, as has our community. Our community places very high value on issues of sustainability and environmental management. I see this as an opportunity to further the work that we're doing in the town of Canmore and further our understanding of these issues, and in a way simply to stand up and say to the rest of our colleagues in elected positions around the country that this is important in the same way that council approved the climate declaration some time ago. It was largely symbolic of the importance of this work to our community, but through making that declaration some time ago, we really were able to step up the work that we're doing to address climate. So for those reasons and many more, I'll support this motion. Others care to speak to them? Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, I think it should be up to the new council to get behind this, and certainly they know what this council's intention and actions were, and the administration's as well. But I feel that this is, and there's sort of we have so many things that we're doing, and they kind of overlap. A number of them overlap, in my view, and it's confusing to the public what the heck we're doing exactly. This is a new program in the public's eyes. And I think that we need to and we don't have any budget assigned to it. And we're always hearing from the staff how their plates are full and they don't have enough time to deal with what they have on their plates. So I would rather leave this to a new council. And we're about to hire, or we're not about to hire, but there will be a new CAO. And I just think it's it's not going to be an effective use of this program. While I applaud the goals of the program, and it's very, very necessary, we sort of need to clean up in this area. For example, the Natural Step program. Let's either do it or punt it, but let's figure it out. And it seems very hazy, and I think it's confusing to the public at the moment, but that's just my opinion, and I'm going away too. So whatever you guys decide is fine.
Councillor Seeley.
Well, I would like to have an active part in this. I think our council's done a lot of work for the environment, and this keeps us moving in the right direction. And the outcomes of reduced waste reduction are important. So I think we can certainly move this forward, and I will support this.
Councillor Hillstead.
I have to agree with Councillor Comfort on this. I think this would be a better decision for the next council, considering there's only 13 days until that happens. So as much as it seems like a great idea, basically I would like to know more information on it to begin with, exactly how our participation looks. The concept is fantastic, and I think it could be a great thing to do, but I just think that is a better decision for the incoming council. Again, it's an awkward time. If this was 6 months ago or something, I'd be maybe a little more up for it, but just with how close it is to the election, I feel that it's better for us to wait and get some more information and let the future council decide.
Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. From what I know of circular economy, this is a fantastic opportunity for us. If there's a procurement opportunity that we can participate in, and we do have to create a framework at some point in time, I would imagine, but there are examples of frameworks that this organization has already facilitated. I think that the economies of scale that we would assume from being involved in a bigger project like this would actually benefit us quite well. And it is in alignment with our climate action goals. And I think if we get involved in something bigger than ourselves, we will have a lot more ability to move those goals forward. So I would be more than happy to support this today, because this is something that we're going to have to go forward into the future with anyway.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I do believe that this is a very valuable program, I'm sure. It seems wonderful after the 10-minute presentation that we've received. But as Councillor Comfort has pointed out, that there are, when you sign on to these, there's generally an obligation of some sort. And I don't feel that within a 10-minute presentation that we've had an opportunity to understand what that is, and what that would mean moving forward, budget, etc. And so I think I would prefer the new council to make the decision as to signing on to this. It could happen within weeks of the new council being sworn in, if it is so important to the new mayor and council. But I just, I agree that the timing is incredibly awkward. If this had come even 2 months ago, it might be a different conversation, but outside of the 10-minute presentation that we've just received, I really don't understand the long-term effects to the organization of signing on to this. And I wouldn't want to sign on to something that just seemed like window dressing. So I think I will pass on voting in favor of signing this today.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I too agree with Councillor Comfort, Hillstead, and what Councillor McCallum has just stated. It's a new program. It is a great program, but I would like to see the new council and mayor be on board and move it forward, and how it affects administration and budget, etc. So for the time being, I would like to see it put on hold and be presented to the new council, and know all the different ins and outs of it. So for right now, I would not support it before it comes again. Thank you.
Just then, in the spirit of debate, I see this as simply one more way to acknowledge the importance of sustainability to the town of Canmore and to our community. It's largely symbolic. At this time, the agreement to sign on as one of 100 communities to sign on at this time. That, as I understand it, that specific opportunity won't be available for the new mayor council. Not to suggest that being involved in circular procurement isn't something that could be available, and I'm certain our administration, our staff are actively working on this already. But I do see value in standing up and being clear about our perspective, and it, given this is coming at the end of a term, I also see the rightness, if you will, of this council making this declaration, because it summarizes in many ways the work we've been doing for this term of council, and it brings to sort of a nice point a lot of the discussions that we've had over the previous 4 years. I don't see this as being a commitment that will generate expenses that future council won't be able to discuss and approve. So I would encourage other members of council to support the motion at this time. There's further discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor and opposed. So motion is defeated with Councillor Seeley, Sanford, and myself in support. And with that, again, thank you, Ms. Goddard, for joining with us today, and we'll certainly be interested in being involved with the council in future years. I'm certain of that. At this time, I will look to the minutes of September 7th meeting of council. Are there errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor and opposed, motion's carried unanimously. I'll then move to item H1, H1, the Regenerative Tourism Framework. And Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Bowman. I am just going to share my screen before we invite our consultant in to present the actual framework so that I can give a bit of an introduction. So what's before you today is a regenerative tourism framework that is being recommended by our tourism task force for council to approve for council to endorse. And again, as just before I introduce the consultant who will take you through the framework and present how it was created, I do want to take a moment to thank our task force members. It was over a year ago that you appointed them on September 8th, and they have been meeting sometimes weekly, but sort of at minimum every 2 weeks for just over a year. October 1st was their first meeting. So the members that are up on the screen here have been very active. They've sat on subcommittees, they've attended meetings, they've gotten themselves educated, they participated in workshops, they attended the mountain market to spread the word about the workshops and our surveys, and they've been very active and engaged participants. So I did want to just read out their names for the record and thank them for all their efforts. There's Adam Walker, Carol Poland, Christy Pashby, David Huggle, Don Saunders-Dahl, Jeff Powder, Jody Conwell, Mace Rosenstein, Martin Bean, Michelle McDonnell, Norbert Meyer, Sarah Elmaligi, Sean Krausert, Rachel Ludwig, who's the Executive Director of Tourism Canmore, Kananaskis, and of course, our own council representatives, Mayor Borrellman and Councillor Seeley. Myself and Sally Cottle and Sarah Jones, our executive assistant, supported the task force. It's been a ton of work, but very rewarding experience. So one of the first jobs of the task force was to select a consultant to assist with the engagement work. And that consultant is Stormy Lake Consulting. I think we have two gentlemen here today, Philip Capard and Jason Thompson, to present the work that they did with the task force and the final results of the framework. So I'll ask if they could turn on their cameras now and join us. And then we will come back to the recommendations after their presentation. So I will stop sharing now. And Jason and Philip are in the room, and I'll pass it on to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mayor, councillors, delighted to be here today at your, I guess, penultimate meeting. So let's make it a good one. And if it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen and take you through a bit of a story. I'll talk fast. Jason will think, and we'll respect your time as much as possible. So this initiative started out as building a sustainable tourism framework, and part of what we want to talk about is how that shifted slightly through the process as we got there. Really, the problem was captured nicely in this comment from one of the people we spoke to. I want everyone to see Canmore, but that's kind of the problem. And it's sort of this love of the place and this concern with what's happening that got at it very well. And we also heard there's a tension. Tourism supports the community and brings in experiences that locals can participate in, and yet we feel like these benefits are at risk. We risk losing them if we continue to accommodate a growing number of visitors without a specific framework on the kinds of experiences we want to give them. And I think that's the call to action we can answer today with how we want to move forward. The engagement we went through, in addition to the year of meetings of the task force, I mean, oh my goodness, what a commitment, we worked on talking about social license in tourism, which is a growing issue around the world. We did some workshops with them. We also looked at quite a lot of secondary research that was provided by the town, Tourism Canmore, Kananaskis, and task force members themselves put forward things they thought was important for us to read. We held 4 public workshops with 161 members. About 29 participants of those worked in the tourism industry, and the other almost 3/4 did not, which is a bit of an interesting observation. We had a fantastic engagement with youth. We went into the high schools and worked with students. So we had 63 students representing 20% of our engagement. And that is very unusual for this kind of work. Usually you get very poor representation of youth, and we had great representation. And interestingly, they brought something to the table that no one else discussed that was, in our opinion, really important. So it was great to include them. We talked to the Affordable Services Program to make sure we weren't sort of income biased in how we approach the perspectives we were gathering. We held in-depth interviews with community members, a couple of elders from the Stoney Nakoda, a couple of youth from the Stoney Nakoda, and Métis Region 3, who, as one would expect and is appropriate, were not speaking for the communities, but speaking for themselves and their own experiences. And I think that's an important distinction. We ran an online survey with 692 people responding. We had 103 responses through mycanmore.ca. We got 3 emails in, which was great, and 47 comments on Facebook. It adds up to 153 hours of engagement. And I'm going to distill that into 5 minutes. So know that there's a lot of stuff we learned that isn't being covered here specifically. We could talk about that if you like. The first very interesting finding was what the community sees as being in the tourism economy. And so 81% of people see hotels in the tourism economy, but that means that 19% of people don't. And that's probably, or at least was to me, a very surprising number of a fairly significant number of residents who don't see the tourism economies, including hotels, restaurants, and cafes, events and festivals, and attractions. So that's a high number, but we would expect it to be a much higher number and starts to speak to a bit of a disconnect between the community and the tourism economy that you'll see coming up in a few other themes. So residents generally see tourism as important, but often negative. And so only just over half of people see the economy as important, and even fewer seeing it as contributing to quality of life. And I think both of those are numbers that, if we're measuring this over time, would like to see move fairly significantly. We do see that the non-permanent resident sees much less of effect of tourism on their lives, but by some accounts, they're sort of part of the tourism economy, and we'll talk about that debate in just a second. Quantitatively, again, tourism's benefits primarily come down to jobs, revenue, and restaurants, and yet 25 to 33% of people don't see those benefits coming out. And I know I'm dwelling a little bit on what's not there. It's just an important part of the findings. Qualitatively, we see the economic driver that benefits non-tourism businesses, creating cultural opportunities, creating a connection to the environment. This sort of more almost philosophical, you can see yourself in a new way, allowing you to see the same place in a different way than you saw it. Building diversity, local pride, these are all fantastic strengths of the tourism economy. But this idea of the economic driver was actually very small, because in the quantitative survey, none of the core ideas identified by the community around tourism spoke to the economic significance. And there really is a bit of a gap there that we want to address. But the problems are obvious. People see congestion, inappropriate behavior with wildlife, overcrowding, parking, litter, people unprepared for the natural environment, disrespectful behavior. These are very visible and largely where the concerns are being driven by. And we're able to drive those into two aspects: behavioral stresses and structural stresses. And those will need to be dealt with in different manners. The behavioral ones can be some amenities, it can be a bit of infrastructure, it can be education. Litter is often because there's no garbage can. So we can blame people for litter, or we can put in a garbage can. And those are some of the considerations down the road to have there. The structural issues are around affordability, seasonality, climate change. Those are really significant structural issues that are going to be harder to work on, but still really important to deal with.
Philip, do you mind
yes,
if we
please.
interrupt with questions, or would you rather?
Yeah,
wait?
please go ahead, dive in.
Just on that last slide. So I'm trying to understand how part-time residents fit under structural stress.
Well, because it's not a behavior that they're living here part-time. It's sort of they are here part-time is how we categorize that, as being a structural issue rather than a non-structural issue. And it wasn't the behavior of part-time residents. It was sort of the town really full in certain times with part-time residents contributing to that. The observation was made by a number of people that the part-time residents are also here when the place is the busiest. And that's contributing to the problem, not the behavior. They were never seen to have the same kind of behavioral issues as the more 100% visitor.
Thank you. Councillor Sealy, you have a question specific to this slide?
Not to this slide, just something earlier in the presentation. You mentioned that youth brought something unique to the table. Can you remind me what that was?
Sure, I was going to save that ta-da for a little bit later in the presentation.
Okay, I'll wait then. Yeah.
So, yeah, don't spoil my moment, Councillor.
All right. Ms. DeSoto, did you have a question to? No, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, delighted to. So at the end of the day, the tension exists that people see it as essential and they know livelihoods depend on it, either directly or indirectly, but there's a need for it to become in balance. And that's where this framework really strives to get there. Mayor Borman just struck on an issue that we certainly saw, is there were sort of four categories of people as they talked about it. They talked about permanent residents, part-time residents, day trip visitors, and overnight visitors. So it's a pretty classic segmentation of it. Some people described the visitors as the visitor, others included part-time residents as the visitor, but a more Indigenous approach to the whole thing is recognizing we're actually all visitors to the land, no matter how permanently we live here or not. And this perspective allowed us to get out of the potentially divisive nature of we versus you, us, them that we want to avoid in the framework, and take a more holistic consideration of it. And you'll see that arising shortly in the framework. The ideal state of tourism in Canmore was fantastic: sustainable tourism, Indigenous history and culture, hospitality, not afraid of change and growth. I don't need to read the whole slide out to you. But what people really wanted it to be, we see as a very constructive future for Canmore, and one we've sort of aimed the framework at reaching for, at getting to. The importance of Indigenous culture, Indigenous history, Indigenous neighbors was very important. We found the Indigenous people we spoke to, the elders and the youth, saw the economic value of tourism very strongly. That was very important to them as an ability to have jobs and display their culture and history. But we also saw in the community at large quite a strong desire for a stronger Indigenous presence in tourism and in the community itself. So there wasn't a divide in there. It was very constructive that it was both ways. This is a quote from a community member and not one of your Indigenous neighbors. And I think it's really nice to see that these ideas are coming together. This really captured a lot of what people wanted, that Canmore is not a place you consume and use up, it's a place you experience and value. Is leave a consumption idea and move into an experiential value idea. And that's, it just like, you could probably just say that instead of the last 5 minutes, but it's a great thought. So we started out with a sustainable tourism framework, and where we evolved was to building, as Lisa said, a regenerative tourism framework. And there's a great definition of that that shapes our thinking. Regenerative systems, regenerative products, regenerative thinking all acknowledge the need to sustain, but also the necessity for continual improvement over the generations. Our goal should not be to just last over an extended period of time, but to continually improve our conditions over that period. And from a tourism framework perspective, that doesn't just speak to the economic aspect of tourism, but very strongly to all of the other parts of what the town wants, is to be better than it was today. And with that inspiration, and it came initially from one of the speakers and totally reinforced through the workshops, as we set out to say, what can the regenerative tourism framework look like? I'll just pause here for any questions on what I've talked about for the last couple of minutes.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions at this time? It appears not. So.
Okay, excellent. We wanted to start out with an important framing that would set up the framework before we got deeply into the mission, vision, and values. Canmore is a tourism town. Diverse visitors provide job opportunities that add to a healthy economy, support businesses and services we would not otherwise attract, and enhance a growing global reputation. Tourism also brings challenges, including increasing human-wildlife interactions, negative environmental impacts, more congestion, disrespectful behaviors, and a lack of affordability. I think that frames exactly the tension we have today in Canmore. So this tourism framework is designed to facilitate a thriving tourism economy and ensure the most important concern of the community is addressed, the regeneration of the essence of Canmore, an authentic, active mountain town that has a meaningful relationship with the natural environment and Indigenous culture and history. And it's that sort of essence of Canmore. Authentic is a risky word because it's overused, but everyone knew that there was a special thing about Canmore that they were afraid of losing, that they really wanted to get stronger. And that's what we want to make sure the framework is singularly focused on, is doing that. And that includes relationship with wildlife. That includes affordability. That includes with amenities and experiences and fantastic weekends that we want to make sure we're putting forward. So to that end, the framework is rooted on a set of mission, vision, and values, whether for a day or a lifetime. We're all visitors to Canmore, a culturally and environmentally rich place. We believe that tourism has the ability and responsibility to enhance quality of life for all. Our vision is that Canmore is a community of hosts and visitors committed to regenerative tourism, through which we leave this beautiful place with a healthier environment, happier community, and stronger economy. And our values are respect for people, community, wildlife, and the land, connection to history, culture, nature, and each other, play, joy, and having fun, and 7 generations, a perspective that honors our diverse roots and considers the impact over generations to come. And Councillor Seeley, this is the thing you were looking for. The only people really to nail it was the youth said, well, all this is great and the environment's super important, but this is fun. We're here to play out in the world. We're here to, enjoy ourselves and be active and be part of the mountains. And we realized that they were right, that we as adults were getting awfully serious over this thing that should be joyful at the same time. And so they've really brought to this framework that conception of joy as a value that we think is so important. Well done, youth. So we see 2 capstones in this framework, one of them being truth and reconciliation, and then second one being climate change, that you can't put into any one area because they really shape everything that we're doing. And as you know, a capstone is that piece at the top of an arch without which the whole thing would fall down. Just as an aside, they're more commonly known as keystones, but keystone isn't a particularly good word these days, so we thought we'd go with the alternative meaning of capstone. Works just as well. Really, we see these capstones as leading to the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. On that, we've built 9 pillars, and this is what really are the fundamental elements of the framework that'll guide future decision-making. So we have tourism awareness, ecological integrity, wildlife coexistence, a thriving industry, working together, affordability, regenerative leadership, informed visitors, and sustainable funding. So in terms of the capstones, and I'll just talk about these, I know you have them in your pre-reads, but we really wanted to align climate change with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and set that into the overall place. And the second one is we have to, as almost a moral imperative, build good relations with the Indigenous community. That's a complicated thing. And one of the drivers of this was we've engaged with the Indigenous community to get here, but we can't go back to them and say, this is what we're going to do. We have to work with them to make sure that what we're going to do is the right thing. And that's one of the key next steps recommendations out of this. And so we say in this particular action, here's some things we'd like to consider, but we're not saying we know they're exactly the right way to work with you. This has to be a partnership as we get there. Pillars, tourism awareness, and this is starting to really help the community understand all of the pros and cons of tourism and not have a bit of a distant view from it. This is in part about communications, but it's also about measurement and understanding and ongoing work to do that. But also to make sure, and this is going to be a win-win, shoulder season activities for residents can really support the tourism economy. So there's some really nice things we can do to have that work all together. Ecological integrity is making sure that biodiversity, ecological function, and processes are maintained. And it's seen that without this, Canmore does not have a long-term future with any kind of tourism, and we need to build it in at this point. One of the key actions out of here is going to be working with partners like Parks Canada, Alberta Parks, the Stoney Nakoda to manage this, because at the end of the day, the municipal boundaries of Canmore aren't quite the same as the tourism boundaries of Canmore, so we need to start to partner outside of our municipal boundaries in order to be successful. We'd also encourage the development of a regenerative tourism assessment that can be included in the process of people planning their businesses. It doesn't exist today, and it would need to be created. Wildlife coexistence was seen by the task force to be a very distinct thing from ecological integrity, and it certainly is a huge issue. And just the bears in town of the last couple of weeks, I think, really reinforce how important this is. And there's things we can do in terms of education and information and trail maintenance and those elements, and even sharing the local knowledge of how to do it can be super important. A thriving industry is critical, and this is where there's a lot of work to be done with Tourism Canmore Kananaskis. We can encourage more people to join. We can provide environmental and wildlife awareness training to frontline tourism workers. We can support the implementation of TCK's strategic plan. There's a number of things that we can do from the framework perspective to enable them to do their work better. Working together is about building the partnerships, not just with the Stoney Nakoda, although that's critical, but with the other people around us, again, on that idea of the flexible boundaries. And this is where one of our next step recommendations to you is to create an ongoing Town of Canmore Tourism Roundtable with an expanded membership that provides recommendations and guidance directly to Council on all aspects of tourism based on the outcomes of this task force and framework. So we'll come back and ask you to speak about that a little bit later. Affordability is one of the most significant issues. This is something that is very complex, and we'd like to see some work done with community partners to work on affordability. We want to elevate the importance of increasing the supply, and we encourage providing incentives to the hospitality sector to provide affordable staff accommodation. We know this is a bigger issue than the framework, but it is probably the single biggest issue that comes up with residents and with businesses. And so the framework just won't have support if we don't have some kind of dealing with that. Regenerative leadership, this is where we say if we want to have a regenerative framework, and it is on the leading edge of approaches to tourism destination management, that we think we want to become leaders in this area. And this is where we can bring more Indigenous businesses in. We can educate and create regenerative tourism ambassadors. We can create a recognition program. And if we really want to reach big, why don't we start figuring it out and teaching it to others? And just the simple act of teaching it to others will really ensure that we become expert in it. Informed visitors, we don't want to overlook, because we've seen those behavioral aspects as being a significant issue that we're dealing with. You already have probably one of the best centers of excellence for professional guides already that can be expanded upon. Educational signage can work, education and support for visitors. All of those elements are really important. And then finally, we want to recognize that if we're doing new things, we need new resources. We can't just sort of say, let's pull it out of what we're doing and move on. And so there's going to need to be some notion of funding. So we'd like to see your support for the ongoing implementation of this. We think your work already on resort municipality status is essential, and so to double down on that efforts. And we would like to see going to businesses to support the framework as well, and a few other mechanisms. So these are all work for that tourism roundtable to consider further. And I think hopefully some progress can be made. So to wrap it up, where we'd like to go next is we first believe the priority is to review, discuss, and revise the framework by engaging with the Stoney Nakoda and other Indigenous partners, including Métis Region 3. As you all probably know, it gets very complicated, but that shouldn't deter us. Second, we'd like to strike a tourism roundtable with the mandate to review key actions, prioritize, define roles, and build a short, medium, and long-term implementation plan. So they take everything we've just said and put it in order. Very important that we report back to the community. They've put a lot of time and effort into inputting into this. We think it's essential we go back and say, this is what we heard and here's what we're going to do. And then finally, take the framework out to the tourism community and the business community and the regional partners. And we see that as the roadshow action of the roundtable to take this out and promote it. So speed talk over. Love to hear questions and comments and debate, disagreement.
Thanks very much for that really brief overview of a year's work. I think Stormy Lake has done a really great job of leading this conversation and working with our community and now delivering on what we'd set out to do, which is create a framework. And I think we all appreciate that this is not something that will happen overnight, but will need to be adopted by both council and the town admin and the community. But in regards to the framework itself, I wondered if you could elaborate a bit on the comments, page 13 of our package. It's the second page, I guess, of the framework. And you note, or the framework notes that the most important concern of the community is the regeneration of the essence of Canmore.
Yes.
And can you, what do people mean when they're talking or saying the essence of Canmore? What do you think that means to people?
So just bear with me a second, and I'm going to pull up from my notes a slide that references that. So when we asked people, so from the engagement, we got a whole list of issues that people were particularly concerned about. And so we sized them by going out in the quantitative survey to the 692 community members and said, how much of an issue are each of these? Because you can tell from the workshops, it's important, you just don't know how significant it is. And when we took a look at that answer and added up all ones related to the community environment, the authenticity of Canmore, it became the #1 issue. So it's kind of distributed across a few different elements. It's not just one thing. And so when we looked at what we really wanted to address, it was what that element was. So it is quality of life, which is, I know, ambiguous. It is being an authentic mountain town. It's having access to the environment. It's community belonging. It's all of those elements, Mayor Borman, that fit into the essence of Canmore, which is why we're using sort of an umbrella term, because it is so multifaceted.
Okay, thanks. That helps a little bit. Are
I
there?
believe you're on mute.
Who, me? I don't think so. Can others hear me?
Yep.
So,
Jason, I
Yes.
can't hear anything right now. Do you want to just field the questions while I sort out my
Sure.
audio?
Yeah, you bet. And
okay, well, let's throw some tough ones at Jason then. Are there questions that councillors have in mind at this time? Councillor Seeley.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, and this is really exceptional work. I was happy to be part of it. It's quite well done. Thank you. You mentioned tension in the community. I think it's common in most tourism communities. How do you present? Where does the tension wind up? Is it normal tension? Is it more tense here than other places? How would you rate that?
yeah, great question. I'm not sure, is it more tense here than in other communities? I think what we really heard was that there is a tension between residents and visitors in terms of how the space is being used. And there is a belief, or I think a feeling on the behalf of many people who live here, that things are just getting overcrowded, overused, and not being treated respectfully. And so part of our framework was in informing the visitors, so helping them to understand how to play in our space in sort of the right ways. But I think also that extends to residents as well. I think tension is coming from this idea of overcrowding, congestion, some of those behavioral and structural things that were shared in one of the slides from the presentation. And so addressing some of those issues will help get at those things that are frustrating people. But also this idea that we're all visitors to the land. We're all, well, yes, we are all visitors to the land, which really came from an Indigenous perspective. I think is part of the way of saying, you know, for the time that we're here, whether we're full-time residents, here on the weekend, here for 2 weeks, here for a day, we all want to treat this place in the same way. And that this framework begins to provide an idea on how that can be done, how that can be accomplished by tapping into ambassadors, by tapping into guides, by being perhaps a global leader in how a mountain town actually can coexist with wildlife and with the beautiful spaces that we have. So is it more than other places? I'm not sure, Councillor Seeley, but we've heard loud and clear that the tension does exist, and we believe that the framework has some ideas in mind on how we can address that.
Thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute in the wrong place. This will be over soon, right, John? You wanted to do this anymore. Also, thank you for your presentation. And I think my favorite part was the fact that you consulted with the kids, the high school students. And I think you're right, they have a lot of valuable things to offer. And this has been like the tourism, how to bring in tourism that doesn't interfere with people's lives, but enhances them, and all of that has been an issue for Canmore for a very long time. And I think you've hit a lot of the right notes here and provided the framework that we asked for. So thank you for that. And I did have a question, and it's gone, but I think that the number of people that you engaged was admirable. The different sectors that you engaged was great. And I don't think there was enough consideration given though to things like affordability. And I mean, we couldn't expect you to address those, but when one considers how things are in other places, Whistler, for example, the first time I went to Whistler was a long time ago. And it was not long after a lot of the development had happened. And it struck me as such a sterile place. I couldn't wait to get out of there because it was so somebody's vision of it was like an outdoor shopping mall to me. And it was not at all what I envisioned for our community. So I really value the small businesses here, the atmosphere that's quite unique and quite different from Banff, and other sort of mountain towns. So I hold a lot of hope for our community. So thank you for your part in that. I also wanted to talk about the Indigenous element. And I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly lately. And here's the thing. I'm going to sound like a really old person here. When I came to Canmore, in 1980, 1979, people, when we moved here, actually, which was 1980, I was like, and we weren't living in town here. We lived out at Pigeon Mountain. And we came in to do our laundry at the laundromat. And I was thrilled, right? Because we were on the edge of the reserve. I'm going to get this chance. How naive was I, right? We're going to get this chance to meet these people and understand something about them. And the people in town said, we don't have anything to do with those people. What are you talking about? So we've come a long way from there. And I'm glad of it. I'm glad that you're pursuing this particular vein. And people seem to be, I hope it's not just a fad, like it's a temporary thing. I hope.
Councillor Comfort, just do you have a question?
I did have a question, and so what I would ask is that what I'm asking, I guess, is that Indigenous piece continue to be embedded in this framework, I guess, and be like, if there are pillars or steps, that is one of the key steps.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Councillor. And I just wanted to share with the rest of the group, I think you really highlighted that essence of Canmore nicely when you talked about the difference between Whistler and Banff. That's exactly what we heard from people, was what makes Canmore so special and our place so special. And that's part of what we tried to capture in that. Philip, was there anything else you wanted to mention from the Indigenous side? Because, he may not see him on the phone, so maybe he can't hear. Anyways, okay. Philip, can you hear us? No, doesn't look like he can. So I will just acknowledge that the Indigenous part of it has been a huge part of the equation for us, reaching out to all the different Indigenous partners and community members that we had was really important. And you can see we've made that not only one of the capstones, but also one of the community outreach programs that are part of our pillars. So we fully agree with you that this has to be an issue for council moving forward in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a related question, Jason. So in looking at the capstones, the second section of the capstones, building good relations with Indigenous community, where would you see that fit under the pillars that are referenced on the previous page?
Yeah, great question. I think it comes through in a couple of different ways. What we heard so often was that we have to do this in concert with everyone in our community. And so it's interesting because it's one of those capstones, we feel that it has a piece in all of those pillars. So when it comes to informing the visitor, it plays a part in that. When it comes to wildlife coexistence, it's taking some of the learning from the Indigenous behaviors about how we exist. So it's interesting, Mayor Borman, but I think that component of it is something that we really see a part of all of these pillars. And so, as part of our next steps, we've suggested that it would be important to connect with those communities so that we can ensure that this framework is being distributed in our community in a way that's consistent with their values and ideas, but also in a way that appeals to or not appeals, but helps our residents and our visitors understand, again, how to use and appreciate this place. So I'm not sure if I could say it's only specific to a couple of pillars. I think it really filters through all 9 of them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think it's a really good perspective you've voiced. And as you were speaking, I was looking at that and seeing exactly what you mean. The relations we're building with the Indigenous community do fit neatly into all of those pillars. So thank you for that. Looking, Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentations. I really do like those 2 capstone ideas that you have for truth and reconciliation and climate change. Those are 2 very important values of our community. So if we're trying to get at community values, I think that's a very good way to do that. There is a statement under ecological integrity that I think the other gentleman spoke about, and that is doing a tourism assessment to ensure it is included in the development and implementation of all tourism-related businesses. Now, the assessment, does that include all businesses, or is that going to constrain the kind of businesses that we can accommodate in Canmore?
Oh, Philip, you're on mute, but I think you can hear things now. No. Okay. Philip's having some technical difficulties, so I'll do my best to share what I think Philip might be saying. So no, I don't think it does restrict the businesses. I think one of the interesting things that came out of our findings from all this was the idea that only certain parts of the tourism economy are. Oh,
we're getting some. We're getting some feedback. Maybe from.
Mayor Borman, I think you might need to mute your mic. I think the feedback might be coming through your system.
All right, we'll give this another go. I think a short answer to your question, Councillor Sanford, is that our belief is that every business that's a part of this town is a part of this tourism framework. It's not just the hotels and the restaurants. We'd like to see the opportunity for all businesses to see their value in it and see their place in it, because we also believe all businesses can have a part in sharing that essence, that beauty of our place, no matter what service they provide. Simple conversations with customers coming in can impact how our framework is a part of what makes Canmore Canmore. So we don't see this as restrictive. We see this as an opportunity for all businesses that want to be involved to be included. And so we'd like to see that happen as much as possible, however this framework is taken forward with them.
Can you hear me now, Jason?
Now I can, Philip, yes.
Zoom troubleshooting complete.
Did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just a follow-up to what Jason said. So Councillor Sanford, this we see as something for the roundtable to work on. Because obviously there's lots of gaps in the particular recommendation. We think it is very aligned with the framework and a very good idea, but lots of details need to be put together. And it'd be something that start with saying, is this something we can do right away or something we need to spend more time working out? So I think the questions you've asked will need to be answered. But as Jason said, in Canmore, every business is connected to the tourism economy directly or indirectly. And so we would be recommending to the roundtable that they look at it from that perspective, but that really would be some important work for them to do.
Thank you.
Are there questions from other members of council? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. In the briefing report that you provided us, it's clear, and through the committee of the whole sort of commentary that we've received over the last year, it's clear that you've had quite a bit of engagement with members of the community, the business community rather, that are either consider themselves to be part of the tourism economy or not. And of course, you've just articulated to us that all businesses are connected to the tourism economy, either directly or indirectly. My question is during the creation of this report and during the conversations that you've had with people in the business community, did you get a sense that everyone was really interested in rowing in all the same direction?
Oh, Philip, you just have to come off mute again.
Okay, that was a very inappropriate word that just left my mouth. I hope you didn't hear it. Anyway, we recognize that this isn't a framework we can enforce on other people, but we need to encourage them to adopt. Businesses seemed very aligned with the issues we're talking about. They're important to all of them. Varying degrees of support to each of the different ones. We didn't see any sort of rejection of the ideas. And I know in the workshops, we would have had people generally aligned with us showing up, but our interviews with local businesses where we did a lot of that engagement, there was a lot of support. And we talked to people in the tourism business arena and people not doing that. So I would say overall, short answer to the question is yes, there is a lot of alignment, but a recognition that this needs to be something people opt into rather than get mandated to do.
Right. And so I guess that's kind of the crux of the conversation is, we've had many conversations around tourism funding, DMO funding, et cetera. And where we sort of hit a wall is getting everyone to row in the same direction. Even in our responses as a community to, say, the roundtable on wildlife-human coexistence, it's put together and was attended by professionals and incredible amounts of expertise, and yet we still get public resistance to the recommendations that come from that, because it doesn't align with people's thinking of how they think. It's almost like COVID, actually. It doesn't align with their understanding of science, so therefore they reject it. And really, the success is all of us rowing in the same direction. And so I guess, as you know, in Alberta, we have limited tools and a limited way of getting what municipalities need to be sustainable, in my opinion. And so I'm just trying to understand if these recommendations come through a lens of understanding that piece, and if there's how realistic, I guess, is it that we're gonna, I love this report. I love the capstones. I love the pillars. I love all the ideas. I am interested in rowing in the same direction.
I'm sure you're coming to a question, Councillor.
I am. Thank you, Your Worship. But I guess I'm just trying to understand how we can capture the imagination of the entire community to row in the same direction.
We see exactly your challenge, and that's largely what we address in the next steps. So we think endorsement from council would be a great big step to say this is important to the town, we want to do something about it. We need to build our working relationships with Estonia and Dakota first. But then we also need to do very serious work to go out into the community and tell them what we've done and sort of shop it around in colloquial language. And we've distinguished between the community residents and to the tourism and business communities. A great asset is Rachel from Tourism Canmore Kananaskis, having been on the task force, is fully in support of this. And one of the very next things she's going to do is to go to her members and say, we need to get behind this too. So we're going to have work from the tourism side. So what you've described, Councillor McCallum, I think is the very first steps of implementation of this through the roundtable to do exactly the work that you've talked about. And we can't just one and done. We need to constantly go out and get people enrolled to talk about successes and keep moving. And that's very much, again, council's endorsement will be a large flag out there saying, yes, this is important. We believe in it, and we've got some work to do.
Thank you.
I have a question around the one of the key actions noted under regenerative leadership, which is the action is to build a center to teach regenerative tourism principles. I recall some discussion about this at the task force, but from your perspective, do you see that as a directive to the community, to the town of Canmore, or just a general benefit? I mean, to build a center to teach regenerative tourism principles is a little outside of the scope of municipal government, but how do you see that being reflected in the future community discussions?
I have to own that one, Mayor Borrowman, because I've been the one fighting hardest for this particular action amongst the team. Jason's smiling because we've had these debates. It's inspired a little bit in the workshops by Banff Center Envy. People look at the Banff Center and say, oh, that's a cool global thing. We don't have one. We should. And the conversation quickly turns to this area where Canmore really can, with some work down the road. So I see this as a stretch action, not something you're ever going to do in the short term. I think a lot of work needs to be done with how it's put together. I think you have all the raw ingredients to do it particularly well. So I would go to the roundtable and say, hey, we've got this wacky idea from a consultant. Do you think it's realistic? And move it forward. But I also think it's a very powerful thing to consider is the sense that you're the best in the world will be one of the things, as Councillor McCallum said, that'll inspire people to rally around and do work on. And you've got a lot of those key ingredients. So it kind of has an interesting role coming together, but it is definitely an ambitious action for sure, and not one that I think the town would ever own, but rather support.
Great. Yes, certainly something like that would require senior levels of government support, and private sector support is not something the municipality could take on independently, but I appreciate the vision. Looking to see if there's further questions. Councillor Stanford.
Thank you. I have a question about sustainable funding, and it suggests that the DMO needs funding support. And
what page are you on, Councillor?
Sorry?
What page are you on?
Page 20 of 71.
Page 20 of 71. So there is some suggestion that we need the funding for all businesses in town to support tourism and tourism framework. Would you see that funding coming out of the business registry, which is the actual collection of business fees, or would you see that as a tax supported funding model?
More the latter, but not ours to recommend at this particular point in time. Like, I hesitate to be kicking everything over to the roundtable, but that again needs a lot more thought and consideration about the right approach to take that. What we want to make sure we recognize in this framework is incremental actions require incremental resources, and we're not blind to that particular fact. This isn't about financially supporting Tourism Canmore, Kananaskis. We have some other recommendations around that. If we can help them increase their membership, that'll get them more funding, which will be very helpful for the work that they do. Resort municipality status would be wonderful, and that's where I'd see the town really doing some more work. I know it's an uphill battle, but you've got some other partners interested in that, really worth the work to continue. That's probably the magic bullet if anything else is. But yes, we would encourage you to work with businesses to say, how can we support the tourism framework and those ambitions? Not necessarily Tourism Canmore, Kananaskis, which has a destination management and promotion mandate. You're really looking at that broader environmental mandate. So that's a bit of a wishy-washy answer to your question. I apologize.
But just to jump in on that, Philip, we did hear from businesses because on our task force were our business owners, and they heard or they shared with us that they would really appreciate council getting behind the framework and supporting the businesses that are operating their businesses in ways that support the framework. So I think it's an acknowledgement as well that when businesses are trying to act along these pillars and within these two capstones, that perhaps, and I'm not beginning to say what those incentives are or what anything looks like, but there's an acknowledgement on behalf of the businesses that an appreciation or an acknowledgement or a partnership with council recognizing their efforts to meet the framework would be helpful. So just add that from the couple of task force members' perspectives.
So it's not necessarily funding the DMO or incentivizing the DMO, but those businesses that may be feeding into the framework appropriately.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions now from members of council? Seeing none, I'm going to unmute myself and take control back of this meeting. So thanks very much for being here, gentlemen. We will move into the motion and discussion phase, and I'll save some of my thoughts for that point. But as I said earlier, really appreciate the work that Stormy Lake has done with the town of Canmore and with our community to deliver on a fairly comprehensive vision. I'm really happy that we ended up, we landed with Stormy Lake. That was a real bonus for the town of Canmore. And thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor, Ms. DeSoto.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Just before you put motions on the floor and enter into debate, I did want to speak briefly to the two motions that because it is an administrative briefing report.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to do that, so now's your opportunity.
Okay, well, I will just share my screen once more and put up the two motions. There we go. Can you see those two motions now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the task force themselves reviewed and helped to craft these motions, and it was really important to the task force members that it wasn't just having council approve or endorse this framework, but that there was some action item coming out that would see the framework moved forward. And this is why Philip and Jason continually reference the roundtable and the important work that the roundtable would have to do. So we have crafted that second motion that council direct administration to work with TCK to create the tourism roundtable and to initiate and monitor progress on the framework and facilitate the ongoing continued broad-based community dialogue, because that was the really important element of the work that the task force and Stormy Lake did with the community, was to bring the various factions in our community together and have these great dialogues about, you know, the issues and tensions in our community and how we might work through those. So the first motion, you know, knowing that this framework is not something that the town of Canmore can do in its entirety. There are multiple elements that will require the support of the business community, the support of our residents and visitors, the support of other levels of government. So we chose the word endorse the regenerative tourism framework because, again, as Philip and Jason mentioned, we do want to take it to the Indigenous community and work with them to get their endorsement as well. And we didn't want to take it as an approved document, but more as of one that we are hoping to engage them on further. So that's the language of that first motion, that council endorse the framework as recommended by the Tourism Task Force, and then that you direct administration to help build the roundtable that's reflective of our community and can help to move the framework forward. So happy to answer any questions if you have any on those recommendations, but that was the reason for the specific language there. And I will stop share. Yes.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you, Ms. DeSoto, for that explanation. Could you just give me an idea of how the second motion would be facilitated? And is that hiring a consultant, or is that collaboratively through those two organizations?
Yes, that will be collaboratively. And Councillor Sanford, if you could mute, I think some of the feedback is happening when we have two mics. Yeah, thank you. As was earlier mentioned, Rachel Ludwig, the Executive Director of TCK, has been on the task force, and the roundtable itself was a recommendation within TCK's strategic plan as well. So their board is very interested in advancing the roundtable, and the concept of the roundtable is that, you know, we bring not just industry to the table and business partners, but environmental sector partners and social sector partners as well. So we will work with TCK to identify and likely advertise in the paper for community and social and environmental sector representation, and then work with TCK to get the business sector representation on that roundtable.
Thank you.
So I just want to jump in on that. So as council will know, there is an alliance of various business boards or organizations, the Canmore Business Alliance, which includes TCK and CHLA and the Chamber and the BIA and I think BODA and perhaps others. And in a loose way, I think that's been viewed by some of those organizations as being the round table that was described in the TCK strategic vision. We had a discussion about this at the last TCK board meeting, and I noted that the strategic vision that TCK approved and the town approved was fairly specific in the makeup of the roundtable to include, for instance, voices from the environmental community. So the timeliness of this is appropriate, given the TCK board is waiting for this framework to be endorsed by council to then inform their next 2-year business plan. So it'll be good to be able to take this conversation and endorsement back to TCK to incorporate in their planning work. Are there other questions for Ms. DeSoto? Councillor Comfort.
I'm just wondering, it seems to me that the best thing that we could achieve would be to achieve resort municipality status similar to other jurisdictions across the country. And the pursuit of that with allies, say like the Banff municipality and others, would be very helpful. So is this the place to embed something like that? Or do we wait for the roundtable to do it? Or how does that work? And that's for Ms. DeSoto.
Yeah, so as council's aware, we have been doing advocacy at the provincial government level jointly with the towns of Banff and Jasper for multiple years, over a decade. I will admit that over the last year and a half with the pandemic and the province's focus being elsewhere, that those conversations have not continued in earnest. However, I think the opportunity is ripe to continue those. You know, the UCP government, like governments before them have identified the growth in the tourism sector as a priority for the province to help diversify provincial economies. They cannot do that without the support of the mountain communities of Canmore, Banff, and Jasper. Our communities are the tourism destinations in the province, and is where the bulk of that growth in tourism will happen. So we believe we have to engage. It's really a provincial regulation change that's needed, either in the Municipal Government Act or some other special granting program, and those efforts need to continue with the next council, absolutely. And I think if we bring tourism business partners along, business speaks in a different way to government. And if we have the support of our local tourism businesses in that effort, that will go a long way. So, with our partnership with Rachel and the businesses at TCK, I think we have renewed interest there as well.
So to follow up on that, sorry, how do we reinforce that to the new, I guess it would be to the new council and to admin that we really need to pursue this now, because that would be of immense benefit for achieving our final goals.
It really is a political advocacy that's needed. And I think that it will be something we'll be talking with through orientation and strategic planning with the new council. It's come up in a lot of the forum questions, as I understand it. So no doubt it is on all of prospective council candidate minds.
Great. So if it falls off the table, I intend to write letters to the editor after the end of my term, just so you know, and you don't care because you're leaving, aren't you? So the incumbents that get in and myself, I wouldn't let this go, because we put in a substantial amount of work on it over the last 8 years, and I think council members could be particularly effective in with the new government, with the provincial government in seeing this through. So yeah, there you go. Thanks, Mrs. Soto.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Just to your concerns, Councillor Comfort, I have met with Miranda Rosen, our MLA, to have these conversations, and she has asked some very specific questions about how we can potentially advance this in our community. And so I think that the listening ears are open. I think the lines of communication are open, and I think it's up to us to continue to advance that. So I think that the government is ready to listen to us and to advance these goals, and as we are. So that conversation has started on my part, and I plan to continue them.
Councillor Comfort.
In the spirit of debate,
actually, we're not debating at this point.
Sorry, I can't debate. What would I call it? Well, I'm just sort of correcting the record, I guess. This conversation has been going on for a long time, and we do not seem to be able to advance it. So I think it's time to, I think you're right, it's time to pursue it again and with vigor. That's all.
Okay, back to questions for Ms. DeSoto in regards to her report. I see no further questions then. Great. Thanks for bringing this report forward, and once again, thanks to Stormy Lake for providing the framework. So with that, I will move the council endorse the Regenerative Tourism Framework as recommended by the Tourism Task Force. And I'll bring the other motion forward separately. So I'll speak to this motion, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness with which administration crafted this recommendation for council. There's a nuance, but it's an important nuance between approving a plan or approving a document and endorsing it. Typically, councils will approve various plans or reports for planning purposes. And we've recognized that at this point, approving the report without some of the continued work that is yet required to make the framework full in the sense of engagement with other elements of the community and certainly with our Indigenous partners. I really like the idea of endorsing this framework rather than approving it. And it's also appropriate that this council should be accepting the framework in this way, given that it was this council that initiated the work over a year ago. So I will be very happy to support the motion to endorse the framework. I look for comments from the others. Councillor Seeley.
Yeah, I'd like to support endorsing this regenerative tourism framework and thank the Tourism Task Force and Stormy Lake for their Herculean work on this. It was very good work, and yeah, I support this.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I too will support the endorsement of this framework. I think it's been a conversation that's been in the community for a while, and it's been a lot of hard work put into it. So I will support this. And I also would like to thank everyone that has put countless hours and thought and input from the community also. So I will support this.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I have to say I've been really, I'm really grateful that this report came out prior to the election. I think over the last year, it is something that we as a group, council, have been pointing to work that's being done. And so I appreciate all of the volunteer hours and work that has gone into this. I have had the opportunity to watch some of the recorded meetings that the group had over the last year, and you could see that there was some difficult conversations that were had, and I really appreciate the public that were involved putting themselves out there and being willing to have those difficult conversations. So this is really important work, and if we thought that the work to get to this point was a lot of hard work, the work moving forward is actually where the real work begins. And I am happy to commit to that work by endorsing this plan on behalf of the Canmore community. But again, as I pointed out in my questioning earlier, it really relies on us all as a group trying to row in the same direction. And so as we move forward to the next phases of this framework, I really encourage the greater community to look inside and see how they can assist in rowing in the same direction and trying to move this forward, because we all love this community, and we really need to show it through trying to walk the steps of this proposed framework. So I'm happy to endorse it, and I thank everyone for their work involved.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I also am happy to support this endorsement. A lot of good work has gone into this plan and this framework, and a lot of hours. And as everyone's already stated, there's been a lot of hard conversations. And as Councillor McCallum just stated, we got to this point and we got to keep going forward. We can't stop now. So the tough work is ahead. We've gotten here and we got to keep climbing. So I'm happy to support this.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I am also happy to endorse this motion. I think it's important to realize how much effort and work and distillation of ideas are in this report. I know that there is a bit of a issue in the community with, deciding whether or not we want tourism or don't want tourism, but tourism is part of our environment. It's part of what we do. It's part of who we are. And I think if we can direct it in a more beneficial way towards the aspirations of the community, I think it's going to serve us well, and it's a valuable road for us to go down. So I will also support it.
Further discussion on the motion? Just before I call the question, I'll add my voice of thanks once again to all of the community members of the task force. It was a huge piece of work and a big commitment on their part. The meetings were almost always in the meetings or in the evenings. And so people were joining in task force meetings after putting in a full day of work in many cases. And I was not surprised because I've come to expect this, but impressed by the commitment on the part of community members that gave their time to this important initiative. So again, from council to all of the volunteers, thank you so much. And with that, I'll call the question on the motion to endorse the framework. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll then move that council direct administration to work with Tourism Canmore Kananaskis to create a tourism roundtable to initiate and monitor progress on the regenerative tourism framework and to facilitate broad-based community dialogue. And I will speak in support of this motion. I really I think it's essential that in some way, and the roundtable is a good way of doing this. It's essential that we ensure that the framework remains an active document and is referred to regularly by not only the town of Canmore, but all of our partners in the business community, and for the Board of Tourism Canmore Kananaskis as well to help take the leadership on creating the roundtable. So quite happy to support the motion. I think it's a really important part of the work that this framework is setting up. For the discussion on the motion, Councillor Seeley.
I'm also happy to support this recommendation to create the Tourism Roundtable. This is an important bridge from the learnings of the Tourism Task Force and is key in the strategic Canmore Kananaskis Community Tourism Strategic Plan. So happy to support.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I too am happy to support this direction. My question was answered about how it would proceed, and I think that's a very good way to continue this conversation. It's a good outcome of the work that was done by the Tourism Task Force. And, you know, when we have a document like this, there are many recommendations that could be enacted, but as we have the roundtable review some of the possibilities, I think that makes it much more achievable to address some of the things that are in the document and, you know, find the most available directions that we can go. So I think the roundtable will have lots to work with and lots of opportunity to consider how it's enacted. So I will support it.
No further discussion, Councillor Hillstead.
Happy to support this motion as well. This is where the real work begins. It's the first step that we take forward with this in our community to move this regenerative tourism framework forward. So it's an important first step and it's only the beginning. So happy to support this.
There's no further discussion on the motion. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. With that, we'll move on to item H2,
Mayor,
2021.
sorry, is there any chance we can get you to take a bio break before the next?
Of course, there's a chance. There's always a chance. I'm magnanimous in my chairing of this last council meeting. So we'll call a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
Well, 12-minute. Let's make it to 11:15. Okay. It's 11:15. Where's Councillor McCallum?
How you
There she is.
doing?
We're live.
I know.
So I'll call the meeting back to order. And we're now turning to item H2, 2021 Council Priorities and Progress Report. Ms. Dinaj.
Actually, it's Ms. DeSoto.
Oh, Ms. DeSoto. Okay. Well, it's been a while since we've seen you, so welcome back.
Well, thank you. And as you rightly pointed out, Ms. Dinaj did author the briefing note, and I do want to acknowledge her and her skill in putting this report together and in collating the progress on your priorities throughout your term. And she's also put the presentation together, but I'm going to give it.
It's always nice to have somebody else prepare your words for you.
Yeah, well, she does such a great job.
Yes, she does.
But so before I forget to share my screen, I will start that because we do have a presentation as mentioned. And so today I'm here just to provide you with an update on your council priorities and the progress we've made throughout your term. So while it isn't the end of the year, it is the last meeting of your term, this council's term. And so it was an appropriate time to give you an update and share progress. So typically what we would do at the end of the year, this is your planning cycle, and we are in the annual business planning cycle that's in the bottom of that. So typically, at the end of the year, we would be reporting on performance over the previous year. And as I mentioned, since is the last meeting of your term, we wanted to give you, the outgoing council, the progress update for your priorities. And your priorities are linked with the vision and goals that you've set throughout your term. And the strategic plan cycle that we are in is the third year of your strategic plan, set from 2019 to 2022. And it's linked to the priorities, and I will get into and share details of progress on the priorities as we go through. But before I do that, I just wanted to provide you with the timeline and remind council how your strategic plan carries into the next year 2022. So that's the intent as we work through strategic planning processes, is to have the current council take the information work through the last year of the strategic plan from the previous council. So while a strategic plan would normally endure and the priorities would normally endure for the 4-year time horizon, because of the disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic, last year in 2020, council decided to open up your strategic plan and revise your priorities. And so the ones I will be commenting on today and updating you on today are those revised priorities that you established or reconfirmed last fall. And then, of course, we will have an election this fall, and the new council will start a brand new strategic planning process starting next year, using some of the community engagement that they've heard through the election process to inform their new strategic plan. So I'm going to proceed in no particular order of your priorities to give you the update. And the first one is in the community goal category. And the priority was to proceed with a near carbon neutral construction plan for a new fire hall. And this is a little bit of a dark photo, but it does show you some of the site workings that have happened there. As you're aware, council approved a capital project for what we call the enabling works, which was really the clearing of the trees on that site, the site grading and the preparation for the new fire hall, including the utility servicing, the development of roadways, access areas, etc. So we still we are in the detailed design phase of the building, and we're at 90% completion on that detailed design phase. We should be ready to go with tender-ready designs by the end of this year, and then it will be up to the next council to approve the construction project based on new budgets built off of the final design program. So the next priority was in the transportation category, and specifically the priority was to create intercept parking opportunities and implement paid parking to fund free local transit services and manage congestion. Very specific project. And so because of the pandemic and the disruption, again, we delayed the implementation of town center paid parking. We did continue to provide fare-free transit services, and I'm pleased to report that ridership, which did wane through the pandemic, is starting to increase and come back, and the fare-free program is a key component of gaining ridership, and we certainly hope that continues. We did proceed, as you're aware, and you received a full update at Committee of the Whole on the paid parking program that was implemented at Quarry Lake. So that was a specific initiative to manage congestion in that very popular amenity area. And the program largely accomplished its goals of managing parking demand at that quarry and controlling spillover into the adjacent neighborhoods. We also did create some temporary intercept parking lots this year. There was a 100 stall lot set up at the back of the home hardware location. However, the pandemic also disrupted our ability to further assess more permanent intercept parking locations, but we do hope to move forward on that in the coming year.
Mr. Soto, do you mind if we jump in with questions on the slides?
Sure, absolutely.
So I'm just trying to remember, I can't remember the number of stalls when Mr. Asarte presented some time ago to council on the expansion of the Elevation Place parking area. Do you recall the number of new stalls that would be created from that work?
Could you be more specific? Are you talking about the Panhandle area or the one?
No, the expansion of the Elevation Place parking area. So there's the concept design for an expansion of the parking area has been completed. So they've completed the planning, but
yeah, but we have not been able to complete that work and do that lot, correct?
No,
yeah.
That's right. I understand that. I don't recall the number of stalls that Mr. Asarte had suggested that expansion would add.
I can certainly get that information, but I don't have that at my fingertips. Sorry.
To me, it was 70 or 80 additional stalls there, but yep, no, that's okay. Thanks.
So moving on to the livability goal area, the new priority was to prioritize the safety of community during the pandemic by increasing maintenance and accessibility of outdoor amenity space. And we did a number of initiatives starting last winter, specifically around winter trail maintenance. So we started to groom and roll some of our gravel and multi-use trails to allow improved access. We also created an extra skating surface out in the Three Sisters area. In May, as you're well aware, we once again made a pedestrian and cyclist only zone on Main Street. And we streamlined processes for permits for amenities such as in-street patios. And then we also started this summer on improvements to the infrastructure at Quarry Lake. So not just paid parking, we formalized the actual parking facilities there to make more efficient flow and patterns. But we started work on 2 new vault washrooms and the construction and design of a jumping platform that will be added in 2022 on the west side of the lake. And that's specifically to improve safety for people who use sort of an ad hoc area for cliff jumping and to mitigate the ongoing erosion that's been problematic as a result of that sort of unstructured activity. So there was a lot of great work that happened under that priority. Under environmental sustainability, your priority was to reduce our community impact on climate change by implementing the commercial organics diversion program. And this specifically was to build on the very successful residential organics and food waste diversion program that we implemented. The commercial organics program launched last December, and currently we have 20 businesses that are participating, and we're encouraging more businesses to join on. That's in part being supported by a generous hospitality grant from the Rotary Club, who are stepping up to help fund the first several weeks of collection for any businesses that might sign up. And in the residential food waste collection area, we did expand that program to add, I think, 10 additional bins in new neighborhoods just this summer, and that's been very well received across all of those neighborhoods. So again, great work happening in that priority area. And then into the strong economy, we just heard about the community conversation on the sustainable vision for tourism that council set as the priority in this area, and heard from Story Lake on the Canmore Regenerative Tourism Framework. We're very excited that that got completed within your term of council and that you were the ones able to endorse that framework, and we'll be looking forward to working with the roundtable to see that that framework gets advanced. And I think that brings me to the end, and just to acknowledge and congratulate council that, you know, part of our job as administration is to help council focus on the priorities that are important to the community and that can be achieved during a single term of office. And I think, you know, based on the information I just shared and the great work that we've been doing in the community, council's priorities have largely been achieved or are in you know, good stead to be completed by the end of that strategic planning horizon, which would be next year. So I want to congratulate you on creating really meaningful priorities and actions for the community and for administration to build on, and wish you all the best as some of you embark on a campaign for the next term of council, and others.
Some of us don't.
Retirement. And how great is that? to be able to retire and have all of this great work behind you. So congratulations once again. And I will stop sharing, and if there are any questions on any of this work, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks very much, Ms. DeSoto. There was something I was going to raise under the transportation issue around paid parking, but I think I'll just hold that for discussion with Mr. Asarde, who's going to be joining us soon to talk about paid parking. So I'll leave that one for later. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Berman, and thank you, Ms. DeSoto, for that really excellent recap of all the good things that have happened. I had a question for you about Quarry Lake. There is a large berm that's being sort of contributed to along the east side of the dog park of that dog park area. Do you know anything about that berm? Is that temporary? Is that just a clean cover storage place for now?
I did see a response to a citizen around that berm, and my understanding is that it is a soil stockpile right now because they're doing some roadway construction to be able to better service the waste containers and amenities at the far end of the lake. So as far as I know, we're not intending to leave that soil stockpile there, but I will follow up and find out for certain.
Yeah, it wasn't a feature that was discussed in any other at any other time, but it's there, and maybe it's just temporary because there is a lot of excavation going on in the parking lot right now. So people have asked me, but thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thanks for the presentation. It's interesting to see the work that we've done in the last year on our strategic plan. I just have a question about items under livability with regards to increasing maintenance and accessibility of outdoor amenity space. In terms of our budgeting, that was budgeted for 2021. It is not necessarily part of a 2022 budget, is it?
You're absolutely correct. That was a special budget specifically to occur during the pandemic to enhance outdoor amenity space so residents and visitors had improved access to the outdoor areas and to be able to recreate safely.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I remember in discussion when we were bringing that forward as part of the budget, there were concerns that it might be considered as the new sort of service level that the public might expect in general post-pandemic. And I just wanted to publicly make it clear that this was just for this 2021 year, and the next council will have to determine whether it's something they want to include in 2022 or if they want to look in other ways based on what's happening in the state of the world and the pandemic itself. Thanks for answering that for me, Ms. DeSoto.
You're welcome. And then just if I could add to that, I do believe we borrowed some equipment from the Canmore Nordic Centre in order to be able to run that trail rolling and program. So we would either have to purchase equipment or find equipment to do that again. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. All of these great ideas have a cost associated, which sometimes no, I'm not going to go there. So are there other questions from members of council for Ms. DeSoto? Seeing none, thanks very much for reporting on our council priorities and progress report.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership, Mayor Borman, throughout this term and for and on those priorities through the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. I think of it as a council leadership. Okay, we're going to move on to item H3. Request for tax penalty refund for tax roll number 22368. Ms. Dalrymple.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Morning.
Hi, I'm back. I'm here before you today with a property tax penalty appeal from the owners of tax roll 22368, who are requesting a refund for the late payment penalties that were incurred in July of this year. Oh, and I just lost my presentation. There we go. Okay. In the case of this property tax account, the current property owners, despite having taken possession of their property on May 15th, were not on title in the municipal software until July 6th, which was 1 week after the June 30th property tax due date. They therefore did not have a copy of the property tax notice outlining the tax levy and the due date. The property tax notice for the 2021 tax levy was printed in the name of the previous owner, who was on title in our system at the time of print, and was mailed, and the notice was mailed to that owner on May 14th. The current property owners contacted the town of Canmore on July 23rd after having received a past due notice, and they promptly made payment for the full balance, including penalty. As outlined in the financial impacts chart in the agenda report, the total penalty amount paid was $176.22, which is based on the 5% penalty applied July 3rd in accordance with the tax penalty bylaw. Now, to give some background regarding how ownership changes are administered, when a property is sold, the change of ownership must be filed with Alberta Land Titles by the parties or by their legal representatives. Once processed, the town is sent semi-monthly downloads from Alberta Land Titles with the updates to the ownership records. It's at this time that we can process the changes in our own municipal database, And only after that download has been actioned are we able to send property tax and utility notifications and invoices to the new owners. In a typical year, the change of ownership would be processed in a municipal system within approximately 4 to 6 weeks of the possession date. In 2021, with an unprecedented volume of property sales across this community and across the province, Alberta Land Titles is currently processing ownership changes approximately 9 to 10 weeks after the documents have been received. So for example, today on October 5th, Alberta Land Titles is registering documents received on July 26th. So we're a full 10 weeks behind now. Although we are seeing an unprecedented lag this year, even at the best of times, there will be a delay of weeks between a possession date and the municipality receiving and processing new ownership information. This delay between the property purchase date and the notification of the change of ownership means that the onus must fall to the purchaser to seek out the information regarding the property tax status and balance for their new property, as well as payment due dates and payment methods. In majority of cases, this information is actually provided to the purchaser by their lawyer at the time of the sale. So municipalities tax a property, not a person. And as the tax collector, the town of Canmore is responsible for mailing the tax bill to the address provided on the tax roll at the time of print. The town of Canmore also advertised the due date and payment methods via the local newspaper on multiple occasions and social media, as well as on the front page of the town website and on the property tax page, webpage. Property owners are responsible for full payment of taxes and penalty for late payments. Non-receipt of a property tax bill does not exempt a taxpayer from penalty due to late payment. Administration receives a number of calls and emails from taxpayers annually requesting forgiveness for late payment penalties. The increased property sales and the delay in receiving the information from Alberta Land Titles this year has led to a larger than usual number of requests for forgiveness from new property owners. Those who follow up with a formal request for penalty forgiveness are forwarded to council. Administration recommends in this case that council uphold the penalties as applied, given that the town followed all required processes and procedures. And at this time, I'd like to invite any questions that you may have for me.
Thanks very much. You mentioned that this situation occurred for a number of taxpayers. Do you have an idea off the top of your head how many taxpayers were affected by this extremely slow processing time from Alberta Land Titles?
It would be sort of an anecdotal sort of number, but I am getting this a lot as we are currently sending out new owner letters to owners who may have just gained possession just around the property tax due date, and so they claim to know nothing of this balance. They didn't know that they owed money. They didn't know that there were property taxes owing on the account. So we are still getting those calls fairly regularly and emails fairly regularly. And again, it's coupled with the delay and the volume. So for example, last year, our average title changes processed in a month was about 140, 142 per month. And this year we're averaging about 209, 210 per month. So, so there's the delay, but then there's also more people who are buying properties and learning of this process and learning of their balances.
Right. So the decision of council on this particular application might have long-ranging effect with other taxpayers.
Correct. Yes.
Councillor Comfort, you had a question? No. Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Mayor Barman. A question, Ms. Darrell, I can never say, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Quickly. Ms. D. Lawyers. So you mentioned in your briefing report that generally this is the function of the legal help that you get when you buy or sell a home. You need to hire a lawyer to do either. Is this generally considered to be the function of a buyer or seller's lawyer? to make sure that the buyer knows the requirements through the town of Canmore, et cetera, or through the real estate agent?
Yeah, so it's certainly my understanding that this is a function of your lawyer. Of course, as we know, there's stronger legal teams than others. We have really strong legal teams here in Canmore who know the drill, so to speak. This year, we have seen more and more Calgary lawyers being used. But having said that, there is a standard document that it's my understanding is standard across the board that is part of a real estate transaction, which is called the Statement of Adjustments. And in that Statement of Adjustments, you've got your sale price and your deposit paid and all the sort of financial transactions. And one of the line items in that Statement of Adjustments is a tax adjustment, where they would say, here are the taxes for the year. We divide this by 365 days. The seller was in the property for X number of days, the purchaser for this number of days. Here's the breakdown and that kind of thing. In a copy of a sample Statement of Adjustments that I received from a lawyer, it's also included at the bottom that the sort of disclaimer that there may be charges which a municipality's taxing authority is entitled to add to the tax roll, which are not recorded at the time of the search. So sort of a buyer beware. And then another line item on that one says the buyer is responsible for payment of the balance of the 2021 or 20 blah taxes. So I'm certainly aware in my personal experience, having bought and sold property here, it's overwhelming, and I get that. And the lawyer's handing you a stack of documents and you're sort of a deer in the headlights. But hopefully the lawyers are, going through that information with them. And ultimately, it's a purchaser's responsibility to read the information provided.
Right. I know that the issues with land titles isn't just a Canmore specific issue. It's a province-wide issue. And it's something that I know a lot of people that work in law or adjacent to legal or property have been griping about for a while, because it was not awesome before the pandemic, and it's just gotten worse with the sheer number of transactions that are occurring. But thank you very much for that answer.
So just to emphasize what you're saying, these taxpayers took possession of the property on May 15th. Is that right? That's
correct.
So prior to taking possession, they would have met with their legal advisor, I suspect, and received the information or the advice that you just referenced. So it's safe for us to assume that occurred prior to possession?
Sorry, I can't confirm that sample document that I was referencing wasn't from their lawyer in particular. I can't confirm what documentation their lawyers provided to them.
Fair enough.
Oh, and technically, I don't know that they need to use a real estate lawyer for that transaction, but I believe a lawyer was used in this case.
Mm-hmm. Well, having gone through this process in the past, I know that whenever a mortgage is issued, there is that letter of disbursement or whatever it's called. So it's common practice. Are there other questions from members of council? I see none. Thanks very much for presenting today, Ms. Dalrymple.
No problem.
With that, I'll move the council uphold the property tax penalties for roll number 22368 in the amount of $176.22. I will speak in support of this motion. I appreciate that for these property owners, I understand it to be a first-time experience, and it can be perhaps overwhelming, the amount of paperwork and legal advice and financial work that goes into purchasing a property. On the other hand, the town has we've heard that the town has followed all the due process in the work that we've done this year in furnishing tax records. It's unfortunate if the tax notice, it's unfortunate if the notice for this property went to the previous owner and the previous owner didn't do anything with it. Given that the indication that this situation has occurred for a number of taxpayers, I'm loath to make a decision that benefits only one taxpayer and may ultimately be applied to several. So the decisive part of this discussion for me is the fact that the town followed the due process and the taxpayer should have had full understanding of the requirements. Other discussion on the motion, Councillor Comfort. Still muted, Councillor. Yeah.
Website, like a list of caveat emptor tips for buying and selling property. I'm putting that perhaps to the clerk, but it might be something that would be good to have and would be a service that wouldn't be very difficult to provide. Just a thought. Is Ms. Dalrymple still with us?
Well, we're in council debate at this point.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, to that point, I don't know if the town of Canmore is the right agency to be providing that information, and I'm pretty sure it exists on our town information pages and through other means of communication. But certainly you've put this forward and admin has heard you, so they could debate it outside of council circle.
I support the recommendation of to uphold the bill because caveat emptor. It's like ultimately it's always the buyer's responsibility to check that all the bills have been paid and all of the transactions are properly documented, and it's just the way it is. So it seems unfair, but isn't really when you consider what the town of Canmore's responsibilities were. So I will also, I will vote for this.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item H4, the 2021 Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta FireSmart grant funded projects. Deputy Chief Martins, or whoever is speaking to this report.
Yes,
there
good
you are.
morning.
Great.
Good morning. Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I join you this morning to request your approval to submit another application for an expression of interest for the 2021 FRIA grant process. Your approval today, if awarded or if granted, would allow for the completion of our application for grant funding to host a full-scale field-level emergency management exercise next spring. This would be an extension of the functional exercise we're hosting later this fall. The exercise in the spring will provide the opportunity for interagency cooperation and cross-training. It will test our municipal emergency management plan, our structural protection plan, and our evacuation plan. It will also allow for multiple town departments to work together along with our neighbors and our agency partners. Additionally, this exercise will also fulfill a requirement of the local authority emergency management regulation. So detailed submissions are due in November. Awards will follow in December. And we would schedule this exercise if successful in our ask for spring of 2022. And happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief. Can you indicate who the interagency partners are at this time? Are there interagency partners outside of municipal realm of our municipality?
There would be. So our ask or our invite list at this point includes Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, the Alberta Wildfire Teams, Banff National Park, as well as the town of Banff, you know, and several of our utility agencies and partners as well.
Great. Would that list include the MD of Bighorn?
Yes, it would. I apologize.
Great.
Yes, they would be in there as well, as would, you know, any, we'll have some initial correspondence with Stoney Nakoda and see if there's any interest for them to participate as well, recognizing they might be a little bit further removed. But
yeah, no, that's great. That was my expectation, and thanks for confirming it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions for Deputy Chief Martins? Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your presentation, Deputy Chief Martins. Where does the community involvement happen in this process?
So for the field level exercise, we would, you know, obviously communicate with the neighborhoods, particularly the neighborhood that would be impacted by the exercise. The goal is to really test our plans, and one of those plans being the evacuation exercise or the evacuation plan. So we would communicate heavily with that neighborhood in particular, let them know what's coming, what our plans are, and what our goals are as well.
Would you do door-to-door leaflets or handouts, or?
That's our plan at this stage. So yes, hopefully.
Do we know which neighborhoods will be?
The plan for this exercise is the Larch neighborhood.
Okay, great. I know that people have been requesting this kind of process, so I'm really happy to see that this is going forward. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Deputy Chief. Are there other questions from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much for being here today to present on this item, Deputy Chief.
Thank you.
With that, I'll move the council approve the submission of an expression of interest for the 2021 Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant. Discussion on that motion. I'll speak in support of the motion. As always, this work is high interest to our community, and certainly a couple of the experiences we had recently this summer with small wildfires is heightened the interest from our community to be sure that our teams are well trained, which they are, thanks to the regular exercises and training activities that they do. And particularly good to note that we are working with many of the regional partners, because ultimately that's what it's going to take, is a regional exercise to address any wildfire that should be facing the community or that we should be faced with. So happy to support this motion. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Again, thank you for joining us today, Deputy Chief Martins.
Thank you.
Great. And with that, I'll move to item H5, 2021 Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action update. And Dr. Cottle, you're on.
Thanks, Mayor Bauman. Before I begin, I do want to just take this opportunity at the last council meeting to say thank you to you and to all of council for this term of service. It's really been a pleasure to work with all of you, and I hope you're very proud of everything you've accomplished. Good luck to those of you running, and especially to Mayor Barrowman and to Councillor Comfort. Personally, I've really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you both, and thanks for all you've done. With that, I will share my screen, and I'll just trust Mayor Barrowman that you're going to tell me if you can't see it. If anybody has any questions at any time, just.
Yeah, we can't quite see it, but we see it being activated.
What does that mean? You can't quite see it?
All we can see are the words. Sally Cottle has started screen sharing, but.
Okay, let me stop and I'll try again. If somebody in the, I don't know what's happening, if there's somebody in the clerk's office who can tell me. Now, if my screen now is frozen. Hello, here comes help. Oh, what did you do?
I have no idea.
Wow.
I think it just.
Can you see
all your clicking.
anything now, Mayor Barlman?
No, just people. Promising. Yes, there we are. And we're seeing the whole.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you could go to the individual slides or not, that'd be great.
Pardon me?
We're seeing the whole screen rather than just the slides, but this works fine. Whoops. Now we're seeing nothing.
You just had presentation mode, Sally. It was just not in presentation mode.
Honestly, I have no idea what's happening.
For all these years of Zooming. Wow. There we go. Perfect.
We're good?
Success.
Okay. Wow. All right. Hopefully it stays. Anyway, thanks everybody for all the. I'm here today to give council a truth and reconciliation update. There's no motions for you to make. It's just an update as the outgoing council of what's been accomplished in the last 2 years since the last update was in front of you. As a reminder, we first made commitments at the beginning of your term in 2017 based on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 actions. And then we've been working to give council an update every 2 years. So I'm here with your 2021 update. And the package in front of you also has additional documents. One is to support, and the additional documents work to support and enhance the town of Canmore's work and commitment to living in right relations with all Indigenous peoples, especially our Stoney Nakoda neighbors. So in terms of updates, since we last were in front of you with an update in 2019, we've provided some additional support for the Eagle's Nest shelter, which is based in Neathny on the reserve. Staff have collected and delivered donations for the Stoney Nakoda community and providing various supports to the shelter as requested. In terms of parenting resources, the Community Social Development Department supported the Stoney Parent Link in their conversion to a family resource network. And we've also collected and delivered supplies from local stores for the FRN during the COVID crisis on reserve. In terms of Indigenous content, both FCSS and FRN have included Indigenous content in their learning spaces and their programming. We've done several things around language and cultural inclusion. The Civic Center mountain names out front will be replaced and translated into Stoney. We had hoped to do that last week, but there's been a delay in the signs. So as soon as those signs are ready, we will make that replacement occur. In 2021, the Public Art Banner Project, which currently those banners are up on Main Street and in the gateway at the Benchlands intersection. That art call was open to all Morley residents, and an emerging artist did submit their work from Morley, from Neathny, and they were featured as part of the 2021 National Indigenous Peoples Day ceremony. And as you know, the Cultural Advisory Committee terms of reference were updated and will include one member from Treaty 7. Under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Stoney Nakoda members regularly attend our town's internal working group, and that's been a direct liaison into the Stoney Nakoda administration to assist us with making sure that the work that we're doing is fitting with what they're interested in seeing happen in our community. As you know, we have a council motion for an MOU with the Stoney Nakoda, which was approved earlier this year. Council has assigned formal town liaisons to work with the Stoney Nakoda Nation. And one of the first is to identify lands for cultural ceremonies within the town of Canmore boundary. And the land acknowledgements have been posted in town buildings. And one of the attachments to your package is a document that's been created for staff and future councils on how to incorporate land acknowledgements into their events and public meetings. Around professional development and training for staff, earlier this year, our friend Knowledge Keeper Buddy Wesley gave a lunch and learn for staff on Stoney Nakoda culture and language, which was very well attended and appreciated. A learning plan for all municipal staff is under development. We're just currently working with our EDI committee on putting those two plans together. And individual staff continue to attend a variety of training opportunities, including the free online University of Alberta course, which I highly recommend. Arts Place has various programmings. We bring in a Kairos blanket exercise for recreation staff, and other staff are invited to attend as there's room. And then we send 2 staff each year to a Right Relations course at the Banff Center. In terms of heritage commemoration, the 2020 Neighborhood Art Project incorporated Indigenous content. Orange Shirt Day was promoted to staff in 2020. And as you know, National Truth and Reconciliation Day has become a national holiday in 2021, which you adopted for the town of Canmore. And we just held a really wonderful event in front of the Civic Center last Thursday to commemorate that day. Around collaboration, the town coordinates a regional working group of all various agencies that are focused on truth and reconciliation efforts. And in sports and recreation, earlier this year, council updated the facility allocation policy, and we adjusted the language so that Meneath-Knee residents are included as local when we are considering participation. So those are all the actions that have occurred since 2019. Some additional work is that one thing is that we were featured in an AUMA guide, the town of Canmore was. The AUMA put out a guide for all municipalities and pointed to some samples of communities who are already doing good truth and reconciliation work. And the town of Canmore was one of the organizations that were featured in that document. The internal working group has created an overarching goals and priorities document, which is attached to your package. That's a companion document to our truth and reconciliation updates. We've also identified in that document several themes that could be further advanced. So staff training is one of them. And as I mentioned, a fulsome plan for staff training is underway and should be completed later this year. We've also developed an internal document for proper protocol. That document is complete and on Town Square and is available for anybody who's working in Indigenous communities. It basically helps us make sure that we are providing appropriate ceremonial and financial protocol for anyone that we work with, and that we're doing that consistently across the organization. And then the last element is around municipal leadership. And when we're talking about municipal leadership, we're really talking about 3 different elements. And we will be working with the next council to advance all 3 of these areas. The first is just in community, how we connect with our community for this work and our role as community leaders. The second is in the organization, how we work to understand truth and reconciliation and make sure that we are an organization who invests in staff to ensure that we're responsive to our current and future responsibilities that are based on our Canadian history. And then the third is at intergovernment level. So how we have a connection with the Stoney Nakoda Nation and their government, and how we interact as a partner government. And one of the other elements of municipal leadership is really around land acknowledgements and ways to incorporate them more fully at the town of Canmore. So one of the other attachments in your package is a guidance document that we'll be rolling out for all staff. It's meant to assist with incorporating land acknowledgements into events and public meeting, and we may consider looking at it as a type of corporate directive or other document. And we'll work with the next council on appropriate ways to incorporate it in council business, including council meetings. With the next council, we'll also ask them to approve the inclusion of 3 new responses to the 94 calls to action. Those are actions 47, 75, and 77, which are included in your attachment, but haven't formally been approved by this council as we've just added them this year. We are currently reviewing training opportunities specifically for the new council, and we'll work with them to identify their priorities and goals and create a plan for advancing truth and reconciliation during their term. So I just wanted to end by acknowledging that all the work that I've just outlined is done by a small but mighty group of staff who meet once a month to try to determine what there is for us to advance and how to advance it collaboratively. So on your screen are the folks who are doing that work. Lisa Brown, Nikki Pakis, Mika Rodenberg, Chris Bartolome, Mark Samusfalvi, Sarah Jones, Therese Rogers, Lou Deuce, and 2 former staffers who have since left the organization, Josh Welsh and Monique DeRosier, have all contributed to the work that I've outlined today. So that's all I have to say for today. And again, there's no motion for council, but I just want to see if you have any questions.
Wow, I mean, a great report. You know, you lose sight over time of all that we have accomplished, and I have to say, I think what the town of Canmore has been doing is significant. And I hadn't realized that AUMA had acknowledged that in their work. So that's quite interesting to hear as well. I don't have questions personally on the report, but I'm looking to see if members of council do. Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, I just wondered, as this continues, can any member of staff come forward and join that group that you showed that's working on it currently?
Yeah, you bet. People are welcome anytime. We do try to put out occasional reminders in the e-news, which goes out every Monday, that staff are welcome, and we'll work to make sure that's included in new employee orientation. It might already be, in fact, so that anybody who's interested knows that they're welcome to join at any time.
And I also want to commend you on the work, and the FCSS department and Lou and everybody. They've just done a great job, and they have a really good understanding of the importance of the work and how important it is. That's all.
Right, and I think it's really important that we take this time and opportunity to not only remind council, but our community, the leadership the town of Canmore is taking on Indigenous relations. And I hope that all the candidates for council seats are watching this meeting. I'd be amazed or surprised if they weren't, but it's a good review for future councillors of the work that the town has been doing, and the importance, the high level of importance that we've placed on this work. So thanks very much for bringing the report forward, Dr. Connell.
My pleasure.
And with that, we'll move on then to the last agenda item, which is agenda item number H6, Downtown Paid Parking Program. And Ms. Smithers is joining us for this.
Yes, I am. Thank you. And I'm just gonna share my screen. There, we good?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you, Mayor Borelman and members of council. I am here today to talk about downtown paid parking with administration's recommendation for moving forward on this previously approved program in future years. So as Ms. Soto already spoke to today, downtown paid parking paid parking was a strategy of council in their 2019 to 2022 council strategic plan, with the intent that the revenues be used for free local transit, fare-free local transit. Just a bit of background in implementing that strategy. The downtown paid parking program was originally approved by council in December of 2019. As you'll recall, it was delayed a couple of times because of COVID. And then in the interim though, as we waited for downtown paid parking to come into effect, we did see paid parking programs implemented both at Quarry Lake in the town of Canmore, and then also at the town of Banff in their downtown. What we learned through these, as a bit of a silver lining of COVID, I guess, is that we do have an opportunity to modify our downtown paid parking program based on the lessons learned in Quarry Lake and at the town of Banff. So some examples of what we've learned from these other programs is that the residential paid parking permit, or the residential parking permit, a lot of alliteration in this presentation. The residential parking permit was originally envisioned, didn't really allow for contractor use of street parking. And as we've identified through Quarry Lake parking, that's a bit of an issue. So we want to be able to address that in the downtown parking permit program. We also have learned that the free parking or extended free periods of parking for residents is something that was both used in Quarry Lake and in the town of Banff. So it's probably something that merits consideration in the downtown paid parking program, just to make sure that we have consistency in town. And I think there's also a benefit to looking at some consistency throughout the Bow Valley as well. And another element of 2021 programs that we might want to investigate more for the downtown paid parking program is an hourly rate that is more in line with rates in Banff. And then we also recognized that the parking program, paid parking program, is bigger than just for downtown in Canmore, because we did identify in a previous report that it is something that we would also want to look at in other high demand areas in town, potentially going forward as a parking congestion management solution. And then also just to flag that we still do intend to have the revenues from paid parking link back to funding fare free transit in Canmore in 2022. So a challenge that we have with all of that in taking some of the lessons learned from the programs that were implemented in 2021 is that the recommendation that was approved by council back in December of 2019 was written at a very operational level of detail, and it really precludes us taking any of these other elements or lessons learned and adapting the program as it was approved in 2019 because of the specificity of those recommendations. So that's why we're in front of you today, because we do see an opportunity to make the downtown paid parking program better. We just don't have the leeway to do so given the original council recommendation. So because of that, we have a couple of recommendations in front of you today. One is that the original motion from 2019 be rescinded and then it be replaced by an approval of implementation of a paid parking program. And then what this would do is it would allow administration on the operational side to make adaptations and improvements to the program as we see them necessary as the program rolls out. And then it also gets us out of just having a downtown paid parking program and then having to come back to council again when we see a need to expand it. So it takes that operational element out of the recommendation and allows us to be more nimble and respond to changes to the program as they're needed. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thanks very much. I do have a couple of questions. And Councillor Hillstead, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Smithers. With the main revenues from the parking program are generally talked about going to fare-free public transit, but on our town website, we actually have that there's potential for it to fund the town center enhancements. Just curious if you could speak to that as I'm looking at the paid parking on our town website, and it actually says funds town center enhancements along with fare-free public transit. And I'm just wondering if there's any other things that we may use the revenues for going forward, like perhaps continuing maintenance at Quarry Lake or other things like that.
Yes, so the paid parking reserve, the purpose of that is flagged as funding, taking that revenue to fund improvements in areas where paid parking has been implemented, and or to fund fare-free transit services, and or to fund the off-site parking related to infrastructure, so intercept parking or shuttle services. So currently, as you recall, with some of the improvements that were made up at Quarry Lake past summer with the additional washrooms and garbage containers, that was funded through the most funding from the province, which we couldn't use that funding for infrastructure that would increase our tax rate. So we've used some of the fare or the paid parking to offset the cost of the maintenance of that infrastructure. So that's an example of where we are using it for maintenance of a local improvement. I just wanted to make sure that we keep in mind that originally linked into that council strategy, a big push with paid parking was to help fund fare-free transit in the community so that we can affect that modal split, because it is also a demand management kind of tool. So, but you're correct. It also is intended to look at local improvements in the area where it's being implemented.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that because, again, a lot of the focus is always on the fare-free transit, which is amazing, but it's literally on our website. So I just wanted to clear that up because there have been concerns in the community that, that's all it's going to, and it's not going to anything else. So just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Just on the same note, currently the fare-free transit is pretty much entirely covered by tax revenue, isn't it?
For 2021, yes, just because we didn't have the paid parking program in place, right? So if you look at the Canmore local service, which is what the fare-free was targeted towards, that costs about just under $1 million a year to run that whole program. So the parking revenues aren't intended to cover that whole cost, just the portion that would have been offset by revenues, which is usually anticipated to be around $100,000. I think last year it was a bit less than that, COVID, I think, yeah. But usually the revenue that we would expect from the local service would be generally $100,000, maybe a bit more.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of the fungibility of dollars, and it's nice to be able to say that word one last time. So the cost of fare-free transit is going to be covered in one way or another. If paid parking revenues offset the tax costs of fare-free transit, that's a good thing, but the money still has to come from somewhere. So it's coming out of one hand and going into the other. I mean, if it comes from tax revenue, that's, residents are paying for that. And if it comes from some of the parking revenue in the downtown, then a portion of the cost would be covered by our visitors. It's just, I don't know if in some of the conversations I've heard recently around this issue, I'm not sure that a lot of residents understand the cost of providing fare-free transit and the source of funding. Just that those things are connected. I saw a hand go up a minute, Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. Smithers, for the presentation. Since we've already set up paid parking at Quarry Lake, is there any cost savings to expanding the service to downtown, or is that two completely different services?
There is definitely some redundancy in terms of just the software. Yeah, there are still a lot of costs, fixed costs for a downtown that relate to the pay stations, for example. Yeah, but there are some savings because it's the same system.
Because we've already embarked on the road and we put it in Quarry Lake before we put it downtown, but there's software services, right, that are part of the process?
Yeah, and I should clarify too, technically savings, it's just where we would have spent the money first downtown and spent it at Quarry Lake, we've just kind of flipped it, right? So we made the upfront investment at Quarry Lake first, and now town center is following instead of the
Oh. And you also mentioned that the reserve allocation includes infrastructure upgrades in places where paid parking is being introduced. So that if we're introducing paid parking into downtown, then we're also looking at streetscape type of infrastructure upgrades, because there is some concern from the BIA that some of the funds coming from paid parking would be applied to improving downtown. Is that understood, that we will be improving downtown with some of those funds?
That's the way that the reserve, that's what the reserve envisioned, right? As I said, it's partly fare free transit. It's partly the local improvements, and then also offsite improvements. So a good example of offsite would be when we get to a shuttle that would go up to Quarry Lake, right? Some of the paid parking revenue from Quarry Lake could support that shuttle. But yeah, for downtown, that was part of the intent of the reserve, to create some of that space for local improvements.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Smithers. So I just want to confirm through this motion approving the implementation of a paid parking program. I understand that it was the operations, getting into the weeds of it, that made the motion in particular problematic. But moving forward, when a new program or an area for paid parking is introduced, will it not necessarily come forward to council for approval, or maybe come to council for approval, or will there be a presentation to council before it's implemented?
I would imagine yes. I mean, I can't, it's not like a specific protocol, but I would think just because these are pretty significant changes in our community, as part of an overall communication plan for the rollout of things like paid parking in new areas, it certainly would be in our best interest to have that conversation with council. I don't know if it would be in a service area report or something like that, as well as just our other communication channels.
Yeah, it's like through the committee of the whole or something like that, just so that we have the ability. It would be nice for council to know what the public does, so that we can field any questions, etc., that come out of the public. As a result.
Yeah, I would agree.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I suspect the new members of council particularly will be interested in understanding the details of the paid parking program, and won't weigh in on this, but the new council may want to have their own approval opportunity. Just my guess. It's my guess. Are there other questions at this time? Yeah, I'm interested in the actual operational details of the new program, but I guess I'll have to wait, just like the rest of the community, and hear all about that after the election, when the details are presented to the new council.
And I think some of that, if I can just speak to that, sorry, Councillor Sanford, some of that would follow just based on even thinking back to the last committee of the whole meeting and the presentation that Mr. Asarte did on lessons learned from the Quarry Lake experience, right? We want to have the opportunity to say, hey, this element of the program didn't exactly work as we intended, and this is what we should do overall to address it. So I don't know that there'd be any big surprises because council was just a couple of weeks ago briefed on that Quarry Lake piece.
Yeah, and you know, the detail that is in the report is good to have, and it notes that admin will be considering the paid parking program to include residential parking permit areas, an extended free period for residents to park in the downtown, and an hourly rate for parking more in line with the rates in the town of Banff, which we know are quite low. So I think that gives us pretty good detail or expectation of what the paid parking program will look like in the near future. Councillor Sanford, right, you had your hand up.
Yes, just in relation to that, when we had the Quarry Lake registration for residents, it was only designated for one vehicle of a household. Is that a model that you think might be carried forward to downtown, or is there a different process based on what Banff did? Because I don't think Banff did the same thing, so.
So that is one area, as Mr. Asarte had flagged with the Quarry Lake program, that we realized we need to have a different approach. So I don't know, I can't say what that is yet. The project team is meeting later this week to discuss more changes to Quarry Lake, but I do know the two programs between downtown and Quarry Lake, the intent would be that they be complementary.
Okay.
Because we don't want to confuse people with a different set of rules depending on what part of town you're in.
Okay, thank you. So that's under consideration as to how to manage downtown. Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Just a question about the second recommended motion that council approve the implementation of a paid parking program. Typically, when council approves a motion like that, there'll be a little more certainty of how it will roll out in the community. But as I understand it, this motion is required because if we rescind the previous motion, administration needs some motion from council directing administration to do the work to plan and bring forward the paid parking program in this case. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, so as shown in in attachment 1, I included some of the detail that was in the original report. We don't want to implement all of that detail because we know based on the town of Banff's experience and our own experience at Quarry Lake that we can develop a better program, deliver a better program than what was originally envisioned. However, if council rescinds that level of detail, we wouldn't have at the kind of programmatic level the ability to implement or deliver downtown paid parking. So that was absolutely the intent of that recommendation, is to say we need council approval at that program level, and then we'll take it from there and figure out the detail that's required to implement it with the objectives of fair free transit and local improvements and the rest of it.
Right. So I guess to my point, it would be problematic, or would it be problematic for administration to move forward with planning the paid parking program without having this second motion approved? Without the second motion, there is no direction from council to plan a paid parking program.
Yeah, correct. Which is, I think it would be problematic because it is again linked to the council's strategic plan. We do need the direction because it is kind of a policy shift as well. So I would say we do need that broad direction.
Great. That was my my thought. Are there other questions, Ms. Smithers, at this time? Seeing none, thanks for joining with us to present on the paid parking.
Thank you.
And with that, I will move that council rescind motion 2260-2019, which reads, moved by Mayor Borman that council approve the implementation of a paid parking program and associated parking strategies in 2020 as presented. I'll combine the motions. Also, council move to approve the implementation of a paid parking program. So speaking to both those motions, I will speak in support of both motions. I think it's important that administration be given direction to reimagine, if you will, the details of the paid parking program, because there's a number of significant changes that are suggested within this report, changes from what we understood the paid parking program would look like. As I suggested in the earlier discussion, with the rescission of motion 2260-2019, I think it's important that the administration does have direction from council to begin to implement a paid parking program. So I am in support of both motions. I continue to support the concept of paid parking. I think it's important. I think it's valuable revenue for some of the work that is imagined to be funded through the paid parking, and really happy to see administration respond to what we've experienced on the ground and what's the experience in our friends to the west with the town of Banff. So kudos to admin for stepping back a little bit and reimagining what the paid parking program in Canmore might look like. Whew. So further discussion, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I too will vote in favor of these two recommendations presented by administration. I think this is a really good news story. A lot of these things that were brought up in terms of parking, free parking for residents, hourly rates, etc., are things that I heard from the public when we were imagining this 2 years ago. And so we have the opportunity to address these before we actually roll the program out. So I actually do think this is a good news story. It addresses the concerns of local people, and this still is a tool to continue to address our mode shift, as well as through fare free transit, as well as manage congestion and manage our parking. So I'll be happy to support these. Thank you.
Councillor Sanford.
You've heard of me, right? Thank you, Mayor Barman. Well, I too will support this direction because I think it's really important that we've had these learning opportunities from other implementations of this. And we're lucky that Banff did it before we did, because we do get to learn from some of the processes and procedures that they've adopted that have worked well. And our implementation strategy is going to be based on some learnings from both the Quarry Lake implementation and the Banff implementation. And we are, regional, so it's important that we do provide that kind of context for implementing these sorts of processes. And I think it's wonderful that we've had the opportunity to learn. So let's apply what we've learned and let's modify it to be better. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Councillor Seeley.
I'll also support this as an important next step, and I'll support it.
Councillor Comfort, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, yes. I also will support it. I really like that we pulled the bit where we prescribed what administration can do and left it up to them to put those details in. And I think that will work a whole lot better. So I think this is a good initiative. I think local people would be pleased with the final rollout, and we really need this. So I will support it.
Further discussion on the motion? Councillor Hillstead.
I'm also happy to support this motion, as I think it does give us a better parking program than what we first described. I think just the learnings that we've had over the summer and from the town of Banff are really going to help improve our parking program. So I think it's important that we do this just so we have the best program that we can have. So I will support this.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Mayor Berman. I too will support the two motions on the table, and I am thankful to administration for constantly looking and learning to not only what's happening in our community, but what's happening in other communities and applying it to what comes before us for decisions. So I will support these.
I'm thinking it's a little ironic how we've been referencing the experience we've gained from watching the rollout in the town of Banff. Thinking back to the comment from Stormy Lake to the effect that as it goes in Canmore, so it goes in Banff. Well, just the opposite here. Anyways, further discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor and opposed, motion's carried unanimously. And I believe that brings us down to just about the end. So I'll open, give the floor to Councillor Comfort.
Yes, so I will keep it brief, although I can go on and on like our worthy mayor. And I just want to first of all thank my council colleagues and the mayor for supporting me through a very difficult year for me, a couple of years actually. And you all have been quite fantastic, and I thank you for that. I also want to thank administration and particularly Ms. DeSoto, who has provided exceptional leadership to this council and prior councils, and has done the yeoman service in her role for 10 years in the town, for the town of Canmore. I also want to thank my favorite departments, so FCSS and the fire department, and thank you for your service and your nimbleness with as funding got changed and renamed and moved about for FCSS. You didn't complain, you didn't hang your head, you didn't sulk, you just kept moving on. So thank you for that. And fire, because my son's a fireman, so what can I say? And I'm sorry that I'm not running again. If my health would permit it, I would absolutely run again and vie for your vote and to serve the town of Canmore. And now I'm going to go away and cry. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Comfort. I'm surprised to hear that you would run again if it wasn't for your health, but so I'll take this opportunity as well to say farewell, adieu, given I'll be adjourning the meeting of council for the last time shortly. It behooves me to take advantage of this opportunity, and I won't go on long nor get all maudlin. But I will say that it's been an amazing experience for me to be involved in helping shape our community and help making decisions that impact so directly our community. Not only through the years as the mayor, but prior to that as a councillor. It's high service indeed, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy. We've had some very stressful issues before council over the last many years. And unlike Councillor Comfort, I am quite happy to be retiring from council work. But that's not to say that I haven't thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity. And certainly the mayor's seat has offered a slightly different perspective from that which I had as a councillor, which has been really worthwhile. I don't regret for a moment having decided to run for the mayor's seat back in 2012, I guess it was. But I have to say that one of the most meaningful parts of the work I've been doing for me has been building the relationships that we have. I've always talked about the relationship between council and administration as a team or a team partnership, and I believe that wholeheartedly. Without the CAO that we've had, Ms. DeSoto, thank you so much for your years of service and for your strong commitment to moving forward with council priorities and your strong support for myself throughout the years. I don't think it would have been anywhere near the positive experience that I've had without Lisa's involvement and the other senior admin, particularly Sally and Lisa and I have been a team going back to the very beginning, and more recently the other members of senior admin who stepped up and our full town team. I mean, it's been such an honor to work with everybody that works with the town of Canmore. So I said I wouldn't get all maudlin, and now I will wrap this up, but I'll see you all around. I commit to not writing new counselors with advice. And it's been a slice working with y'all. So, yeah. And I think with that, for the very last time in my life, I will move that the Council of the Town of Canmore be adjourned. Those in favor? We are adjourned.